The time is now 5:32 on June 19th, 2019, and this public meeting of the State Board of Education will come to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Mr. Hayworth, please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi.
Present, sorry.
Mr. Jacobson.
Present.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Present.
Dr. O'Leary.
Present.
Mr. Parker. Mr. Parker. Dr. Sutter.
Present.
Williams.
Present.
Mr. Batchelor.
Present.
Ms. MacLeay.
Present.
Ms. Alicia.
Present.
Ms. Robinson. Ms. Robinson. Madam President, you have quorum.
Thank you. A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will proceed now with the business portion of the meeting. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda?
Madam President.
Ms. Williams?
Madam President, I move that we amend the agenda to remove item 12 SR 19-6 and item 13 SR 19-7 in order to have additional discussion on both resolutions at our next working session.
Okay. Okay, a motion may be withdrawn only with the consent of the body. Right? Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Is there discussion? The motion being properly moved and forwarded, I will ask for the yeas and the nays. All in favor of changing the agenda, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? The motion is approved. Members, we have the minutes from our June 5th working session.
You have to actually approve the full agenda now.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we now have the adjusted agenda in front of us. Do I have a motion to approve that agenda?
So moved.
Second? Okay. Is the motion being properly moved and seconded? I will ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is approved. Members, we have the minutes from our June 5th working session before us. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing no changes, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion being properly moved and seconded, I will ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion is approved. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ruth Wattenberg. I'm the Ward 3 representative and president of the State Board of Education. On behalf of the members of the District of Columbia State Board of Ed, I want to welcome our guests and our viewing public to our Wednesday, June 19th public meeting. The State Board holds its regularly scheduled meetings on the third Wednesday of every month at the Old Council Chambers at 441 4th Street Northwest. In addition to broadcasting this meeting live via the District Knowledge Network, we are also live streaming via Periscope on Twitter, and the video for the meeting will be posted on our YouTube page, DC SBOE. Our next official meeting of the State Board is our July working session. Due to the Independence Day holiday, that meeting will be shifted to Tuesday, July 2nd at 5 p.m. Please contact the State Board of Ed office if you have any questions. Tonight, we will consider a number of ceremonial resolutions honoring people, programs, and organizations that have made a difference for district students. This includes former Chief Student Advocate Faith Gibson Hubbard, the incredible student leaders of our Student Advisory Committee, and the dedicated members of the State Board's Every Student Succeeds Act Task Force. The State Board will also recognize the 154th anniversary of Juneteenth, a celebration of freedom and equal rights in the District of Columbia and nationwide. Tonight, the State Board will hear reports from the Student Advisory Committee and from the ESSA Task Force. The State Board organizes committees and task forces to amplify community input so that we can ensure our members hear diverse voices from across our city prior to making decisions. The State Board of Ed will also vote to accept each report. Accepting the report is not necessarily an endorsement of the recommendations contained within it, but it allows the State Board to officially begin discussions on their contents. We look forward to the panelists' testimony and thank them for being here. Okay, So our superintendent is on her way. This is normally where she would talk, but she's on crutches and she's going to be a little late, so we're going to start with the ceremonial resolutions. Okay. Tonight, the State Board will consider 8 ceremonial resolutions. We use ceremonial resolutions to recognize and honor people, schools, or items of note. After considering all 8 resolutions, the State Board will take a short recess to present the resolutions to our guests. Our first resolution recognizes the anniversary of the end of slavery in the United States. 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation went into force, Major General Gordon Granger landed in Galveston, Texas, on June 19, 1865, with the profound news that the Civil War was over and that all slaves were free. It is in memory of the generations of Black Americans that toiled and in celebration of the achievements of the generation since that we honor Juneteenth today. Mr. Batchelor, would you like to make that motion?
So moved, Madam President.
Is there a second? Second. The motion having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, will you read the resolution into the record?
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolutions celebrating Juneteenth Independence Day, CR 19-11. Whereas Juneteenth Independence Day, or Juneteenth, is an American holiday that commemorates the abolition of slavery in the United States. Whereas while President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863, the end of slavery did not actually reach some frontier states, including Texas, for nearly 2.5 years. Whereas the name Juneteenth refers to June 19, 1865, on which date Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas, and issued General Order No. 3, proclaiming in Texas that the Civil War was over and that any enslaved people were free. Whereas in the over 150 years since, Juneteenth has become a celebration and tradition that commemorates and honors African American freedom. Whereas today, 45 states and the District of Columbia have officially recognized June 19th as a day to honor the emancipation of all slaves in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth celebrates African American freedom and achievement, self-development, and respect for all cultures. Now therefore be it resolved that the D.C. State Board of Education recognizes and celebrates the historical significance of Juneteenth Independence Day in the District of Columbia and in the entire nation.
Thank you. The motion having been properly moved in, thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution?
Madam President.
Please.
I'll just say briefly, I thank my colleagues for pausing for a second to recognize this holiday and this commemoration of the end of slavery, but also pause to really think about how we redouble our efforts to cast out the inequalities that still exist, chief among them the educational inequalities that exist in our country and in our city. So thank you to my colleagues, and thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, I'd like to also mention about the reparations bill that's in front of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and that we need to have everyone get behind that and not let it disappear quickly.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, the vote is now on approval of Ceremonial Resolution 1911. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, no. The ayes have it. And I'm going to break now from the ceremonials and turn to our superintendent. Are you ready? Do you want us to go one more?
Sure.
All right. Welcome, and thank you for making it.
Thank you. I apologize for being a little bit late. Thank you, President Wattenberg, and it's good to be with you and the board for the June public session. I just wanted to note that OSSI was really pleased a couple of weeks ago to be able to come before the board and fulfill our commitment to report out on a proposal for including high school growth in the STAR framework in the future. We appreciate the board's commitment to this important issue, and it's a commitment that we share at OSSI, and we look forward to further discussions. I also wanted to note that I know tonight the board will be recognizing the ESSA task force for their hard work and dedication. We've been pleased to be a part of this task force and are very thankful for the people that served on it. The task force was instrumental in helping make our engagement for the DC School Report Card a meaningful and significant success. The members of the task force pushed our thinking, and I believe that the work we have done together has paid off in the deep feedback that we received and the tool and the ways in which we were able to strengthen the tool as a tool for communication and use by families and by the public. I look forward to hearing more about the recommendations made by the task force's working group in the report given to the board this evening. I'm also pleased to see that the board is considering resolutions that will excuse me, outline the work that you will be undertaking, and look forward to hearing more about these resolutions as you go forward. Finally, just wanted to note that we were very pleased to hold our first ever from OSSE Multilingual Learner Conference on June 7th and 8th. The conference was an opportunity to convene teachers, school leaders, and service providers who support dual language and or English language programs. We know that this has been an area of significant interest from the community and the public who have expressed the need for more dual language immersion programs and opportunities for students to learn a second language. We know also how important proficiency in a second language is as an asset in our global economy, and that all students, no matter their background, deserve access to this type of education. So we look forward to continuing to support English language learners and dual language learners from all backgrounds through our work at OSSE. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you very much. Returning to the resolutions, 2 of our resolutions reflect the very deep appreciation of the State Board for our partners in education. First, our former Chief Student Advocate, Dr. Faith Gibson Hubbard. I'd like to turn to our former President, Jack Jacobson of Ward 2, for the motion.
I'd move the resolution.
The motion having been properly moved and seconded.
Second.
Second, sorry.
Second.
The motion having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, would you read the resolution into the record?
Happily. State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution to honor former Chief Student Advocate Faith Gibson Hubbard, CR 19-12. Whereas the D.C. State Board of Education appointed Faith Gibson Hubbard to serve as the first Chief Student Advocate of the Office of the Student Advocate in May 2015. Whereas Dr. Gibson Hubbard has been a tireless advocate for education throughout her career, and as a former public school teacher, the former president of the Ward 5 Council on Education, a member of the Advisory Committee for the Student Assignment and DCPS School Boundaries Review Process, and it is a member of the DC Public Library Board of Library Trustees. Whereas Dr. Gibson Hubbard has used her experience and knowledge to build an office that works to increase family voice, access, and power in our public education system. Whereas under Dr. Gibson Hubbard's leadership, the OSA became a trusted resource for both families and schools. Whereas the OSA continues to ensure that families are connected to resources and supports, informed of their rights, and understand how the system works. And whereas Dr. Gibson Hubbard has since been appointed by Mayor Muriel Bowser as the first Executive Director of Thrive by 5 DC, an initiative coordinating resources and services for families of young children in the district, including early education opportunities. Now therefore be it resolved that the District of Columbia State Board of Education honors former Chief Student Advocate Faith Gibson Hubbard on the 19th day of June in the year 2019 for her outstanding service and leadership to the District of Columbia.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution?
Can we give her a standing ovation? Is that against?
Yeah.
Madam President,
Thank you for that, Fraser and Dr. Sutter.
I simply want to recognize that when Dr. Faith Gibson Hubbard was the Chief Student Advocate, she was Ms. Gibson Hubbard, Mrs., and now she is Dr., and she undertook that work while working full-time. And I simply want to recognize her and congratulate her for that effort. Very glad to be able to call you Doctor today.
Madam President.
Ms. Williams, and then.
I have to say that it's been a joy working with you, but more importantly, I spotted you and we hired you. So thank you for all that you've done in establishing the Office of Chief Student Advocate, making it a place that helps parents in the District of Columbia, and we hope to continue to work together.
Mr. Parker?
I just want to say I am feeling a special connection to this resolution tonight. One, because Dr. Gibson Hubbard is a Ward 5 resident, but also I have adopted her as an informal advisor on many things, and so she can attest that I call her regarding a host of things. And I've just really appreciated her approach, her thoughtfulness, her connection and how she leverages those connections to advance the important work of not just this body, but all things regarding students in the city, and her genuine concern for our most vulnerable students in this city and across the country. And I think many in this room would attest that she's willing to tell the truth, regardless of who it's for or who it's against. And we need more advocates like that. And I just wanted to say thank you for all you do, and this is well deserved.
Madam President. I'll just say very quickly to Dr. Gibson Hubbard, thank you so much for your service. Obviously, as members of the board, but also in the Office of the Student Advocate and the Ombudsman for Public Education, these last few years have really been about establishing ourselves as a voice and a resource for the families and children in the District of Columbia. And I just want to commend you for setting such a firm foundation in the Office of the Student Advocate that families, especially in 5, 7, and 8, are coming to you as a resource to be that voice, to be that resource that they can go to when they're on their, at the end of their rope. And you've done that time and again, and given all of us as representatives of the people valuable information that we can run with and advocate. And you've done your fair share of advocacy as well. And I'm very excited that the young people and the families who are raising very young people in this city are going to have a resource in you via the Thrive by 5 initiative. And we're really excited about your continued leadership in the education space in the district. So thank you.
Ms. MacLeay?
Just very quickly, Faith, thank you very much for all of you that you've done. I'm just going to reiterate everything that's already been said. Kudos to you, and I can't wait to see the work that you do with Thrive by 5 and continue to work with you in your leadership.
I feel like I have to say something, Madam President. I'm not going to be the only one not to, but when I first came onto the board, you reached out to me and welcomed me, and I'm just really glad that I had the opportunity to meet you, and will definitely be very proactive about staying in touch, and just really appreciate all the work that you do. So thank you.
And I just want to concur also with everything. Thank you very, very much, Faith, for all of the work, for standing up this office that is here and it's going to be stronger and stronger, and for the work that I know you're going to do in the future. Oh, Jack?
I'd be remiss if I didn't say a couple of words. Not only did Dr. Gibson Hubbard stand up an office from scratch, not only did she run that office with integrity and with passion, not only did she earn her doctorate while serving as the Chief Student Advocate, not only did she serve as our interim ombudsman, leading that office to solve the problems of students across the district, looking at fairness and equity and access. Amongst all that, she also reared 2 children, I believe, and grew her family that is so wonderful and so loving. And we are so blessed to have had you as a part of our team, and the district is fortunate that you will continue to be a community leader and a city leader, and we're all better off for it. Thank you, Faith.
Thank you again for all of us. Seeing no further discussion, the vote is on approval of Ceremonial Resolution 1912.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
About a second.
You did that. All opposed, say no.
No.
The ayes have it. Faith, thank you so, so, so much for everything that you did, and many, many congratulations and good luck for the work that you're going to do in the future. Our next resolution honors the nearly 15 years of service in STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math for district students by Maya Garcia. Is there a motion on the resolution?
I'd like to make the motion as a Ward 4 representative to be accepted.
And as her former student, I second.
Oh, good. The motion having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, will you read the resolution into the record?
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution honoring Maya Garcia for her contributions to public education in the District of Columbia, CR 19-13. Whereas Maya Garcia, a resident of Ward 4 in Washington, D.C., has, since 2005, worked in public education in the District of Columbia. Whereas Ms. Garcia graduated with a bachelor's degree in neuroscience and behavior from Mount Holyoke College and earned a master's of arts in teaching from American University. Whereas Ms. Garcia taught high school science for 8 years in the District of Columbia public school system. Whereas Ms. Garcia has served for nearly 6 years with the Office of the State Superintendent for Education as the Director of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Whereas through her work as Director of STEM, Ms. Garcia worked to ensure that all students in the district graduate high school with a college and career-ready mastery of science, technology, engineering, and math, and to increase the number of district students who go on to STEM majors and STEM careers. And whereas during her tenure, Ms. Garcia oversaw the state's adoption of the Next Generation Science Standards and the development of the district's strategic plan for advancing STEM education, and the launch of the DC STEM Network in partnership with the Carnegie Science Foundation. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education honors Ms. Maya Garcia for her significant contributions to public education and STEM in the District of Columbia, and thanks her for her service to the district's students.
Any discussion? Mr. Jacobson?
I was fairly new on the board when the Next Generation Science Standards came up. Karen and I were brand new, I think, and we were led through a very thoughtful series of meetings and briefings and community meetings, and I just wanted to say thank you for being patient with me and for undertaking that really critical, important work to get the Next Generation Science Standards up and implemented, and we appreciate your leadership. You'll be missed.
For the, Ms. Williams?
I just have to reiterate what Jack said. We were new to the board, we were newbies, and we didn't know the system, but you made it comfortable to navigate. You gave us the information we needed when we needed, and you pushed us through that process, which made us better board members and better citizens. Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
I think your service to our city has not been understated today, but I want to personally thank you for being such a rock star teacher. And I can say if it weren't for educators like you, there would be no way that I would be here today. So thank you, Ms. Garcia.
And I want to say all the science standards making preceded me, and you weren't my teacher, though I wish you were. But what I do want to note is that once I was elected, one of the very first things that I was able to do was to go to the science fair and to meet you. And I remember Mary Lord introduced me, and we met and we talked, and I saw the wonderful exhibits, and you've been present ever since. And I thank you so much for everything that you have done on all of that. And good luck to you in your new work, in your new state, and maybe one day you'll come back. Seeing no further discussion, the vote is on approval of Ceremonial Resolution 1913. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, no. The ayes have it. I would like to consider the next two resolutions en bloc because they recognize similar contributions to the work of the State Board. CR 1914 recognizes our school year 2018-19 Student Advisory Committee, and CR 1915 does the same for the members of our ESSA task force. I'd like to turn for the motion to our most recent former president, Karen Williams of Ward 7.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, will you read the resolutions into the record?
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution recognizing the 2018-19 Student Advisory Committee, CR 19-14. Whereas the Student Advisory Committee was established in March 2015 to provide a voice for all students in the District of Columbia and to promote communication between the State Board, district students, and other education decision makers. Whereas the 2018-2019 Student Advisory Committee has been led by student representatives Tatiana Robinson, a senior at Frank W. Ballou Senior High School, and Marjorie Alicia, a senior at Capital City Public Charter School. Whereas students of the 2018-19 SAC have met monthly to discuss education policy issues of importance to students in the District of Columbia, convene speakers and presenters to share insights, and engage with their respective high schools to bring awareness to the work of the State Board. And whereas the 2018-19 Student Advisory Committee has focused its work on the issue of teacher retention in the district and its effects on all students, presenting a report and recommendations and recommended next steps to the State Board on this important issue. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education honors and celebrates the accomplishments and service of the 2018-19 Student Advisory Committee and its student leaders, Tatiana Robinson and Marjorie Alicia. State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution recognizing the Every Student Succeeds Act Task Force, CR 19-15. Whereas in March 2017, the DC State Board of Education approved the District of Columbia's Every Student Succeeds Act State Accountability Plan. Whereas in May 2017, the State Board approved the creation of a task force of district residents, education experts, and community stakeholders to advise the State Board and the Office of the State Superintendent for Education on the implementation of the federal law. Whereas over the past 2 years, the ESSA task force has met on a monthly basis, working extensively with OSSI on the development of the DC School Report Card and discussing educational equity issues with each other and with outside experts. Whereas this work has resulted in substantive changes to the DC School Report Card by OSSI and the formal adoption of an equity statement by SBOE. And whereas the task force held its final meeting on June 11, 2019, and voted to adopt a final report to the State Board concerning its activities in ESSA implementation. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education thanks Dr. Lynette Woodruff, former Ward 4 representative, and Karen Williams, Ward 7 representative, for their leadership of the task force and all past and present members of the ESSA task force for their valuable service to the district's students and schools. Be it further resolved that the State Board has received the final report from the task force and will take its observations and recommendations into account as part of the agency's broader responsibilities regarding ESSA implementation. Be it further resolved that the State Board wishes to individually recognize and thank Josh Boots, Samantha Brown, Yolanda Corbett, Allison Kreiner Brown, Hannah Dunn, Laura Fuchs, Ann Hare, Jack Jacobson, Aaron Kupferberg, Maya Martin Cadogan, Jacques Patterson, Richard Pullman, Elizabeth Primus, Daniel Rodriguez, Alex Rose Henning, Sheila Strain Clark, Joanna Turner, Joe Whedon, and Suzanne Wells for their service throughout the full 2-year task force commitment. Be it finally resolved that the State Board is grateful for OSSI's sustained partnership with the task force and for the agency's engagement efforts in developing its accountability system.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolutions?
I'd like to just thank our 2 student representatives because this is their last night. I don't know where Tatiana is. She had a fabulous graduation last night, and I was able to go to both graduations of our student representatives this year. And it was really exciting. And I know that they're going to be tremendously successful starting in August. So you get a chance to breathe, then you got to go back to work.
Yes.
I just have to say that the 2 years that we required of this task force was a long 2 years, but we did substantial work, and I'm very thankful for Dr. Woodruff for starting it, but I'm also upset with her that she left it in my hands when she left. And so we will make sure that she gets the full report of this resolution and a copy of it, and may the work of the ESSA task force continue in the future. Thank you. Thank all of you who served.
Others? Mr. Batchelor?
I'll just say that the voices of folks who choose to contribute to the discussion here on this board are invaluable. And over the past year to 2 years, the voices on the ESSA task force and of our student members have been extremely invaluable to our work. And so I want to thank all of the folks who took the time to come to many meetings and hash out very tough issues and really provide us with recommendations that will help this process move forward and help this state plan be better for our schools, for our students, and for our educators. And to our student members, thank you for taking your time out of what we already know are very busy schedules to do this work and contribute to this board, but also organize your peers who were members of the Student Advisory Committee and for leading that charge over the last year, and in Tatiana's case, 2 years. Go Blue, go Ward 8. And so I thank you all for all that you've given us and for the invaluable voice you provided for the folks that you represent. Thank you.
Others? Well, let me just say, soon after I was elected president, I went to the Student Advisory Committee meeting, and they happened to be talking about teacher turnover and teacher retention, which, as you know, has been a huge issue for this board. And I was just stunned, frankly, by the specific examples that people had about the different ways that this issue really, really affected the quality of education that they got, the way their schools were organized, the relationships that they had with their teachers, the effect on school culture generally. It was really stunning. And they then came and talked about this at a public meeting of the State Board of Ed. And I think other people were, again, stunned by this. 2 of the members came, and then subsequently 2 of the members wrote an op-ed that was in the DC Line that, again, got a lot of attention. So 2 of the students ended up being the face of this in a couple of different events, but the experiences were across the board, and I think led all of us to really double down on how important this issue is. So thank you very much. Okay, no further discussion. The vote is on approval of Ceremonial Resolution 1914 and 1915. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Congratulations. Our next resolution honors College Bound, Inc. and its founder, Kenneth Ward. Mr. Batchelor, would you make the motion?
Madam President, so moved.
Is there a second? The motion having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, will you read the resolution into the record?
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution recognizing the contributions of College Bound, Inc. to the district students, CR 19-16. Whereas College Bound, Inc. is a DC-based nonprofit organization that offers traditional public and public charter school students in grades 8 through 12 academic enrichment and resources to prepare them for and to help them succeed in college. Whereas College Bound was founded in 1991 and now offers free of charge tutoring, mentoring, ACT, SAT preparation, and academic and career guidance to assist students in the district in meeting their post-secondary goals. Whereas under the leadership of Mr. Kenneth Ward, a resident of Southwest Washington, who was named the organization's executive director in 2009, both the total amount of scholarship dollars awarded by College Bound and the number of students that organization serves has more than tripled. And whereas during Mr. Ward's tenure, he has helped open 3 workplace mentoring sites, implemented a virtual mentoring program, and was recently awarded the 2019 Lifetime Achievement Award by Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. Now therefore be it resolved that on the 19th day of June in the year 2019, the District of Columbia State Board of Education acknowledges the leadership of Executive Director Kenneth Ward and College Bound's contributions to making college a reality for more students in the district.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution?
Madam President, just very briefly, I want to thank all the folks who make this extraordinary program possible, especially Mr. Ward, who I see has joined us in the chamber this evening. I got an opportunity to go to College Bound's last scholarship award ceremony, and both the enthusiasm that students had about pursuing higher education, but also all of the money that was raked in to help make that possible is not something that is unprecedented in our city. And so I thought that we should take the time to recognize those folks who do work to make sure that our students make it through high school, are on track to succeed, but then also who take the time out to support those students to make sure that they make it all the way through college. And that's a very important endeavor that this organization has filled. It's a very important need that this organization has filled. So thank you to Mr. Ward and to all of your teams who I think operate 7 sites across the district every week to make this program possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you. For any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the vote is on approval of Ceremonial Resolution 1916. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, no. The ayes have it. I would like to consider our next 2 resolutions on block. These resolutions recognize the anniversaries of... Oh. Thank you. These next resolutions recognize the anniversaries of the Marion S. Berry Summer Youth Employment Program and the Marion Berry Youth Leadership Institute. Both have impacted generations of district students in very substantial ways. Mr. Batchelor, would you make the motion?
Madam President, so moved.
Second? Second. The motion having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, will you read the resolutions into the record?
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution on the 40th anniversary of the Marion S. Berry Summer Youth Employment Program, CR 19-17. Whereas District of Columbia Mayor Marion Berry first established the Summer Youth Employment Program in 1979. Whereas the mission of the program is to connect district youth with employment opportunities, allow them to build work experience, develop their skills and networks, learn about careers, and earn money. Whereas in 2015, Mayor Muriel Bowser changed the program's name to the Marion S. Berry Summer Youth Employment Program to honor Mayor Berry's memory and impact on generations of district residents. Whereas over the course of its history, the MBSYEP has offered jobs and professional development opportunities to hundreds of thousands of program participants. Whereas in 2018, the MBSYEP served 10,159 district residents between the ages of 14 and 24, offering job placement to every single applicant certified eligible to work. And whereas last year, MBSYEP participants together worked nearly 1 million hours in jobs across the District of Columbia in just 6 weeks over the summer. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education thanks the DC Department of Employment Services for its efforts in administering the Marion S. Berry Summer Youth Employment Program on the occasion of its 40th anniversary, and be it further resolved that the State Board recognizes the impact and the potential of summer programs and employment initiatives to extend economic opportunity to young people, and especially the district's most vulnerable residents.
Thank you.
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution on the 40th anniversary of the Marion Berry Youth Leadership Institute, CR 19-18. Whereas District of Columbia Marion Berry founded the Mayor's Youth Leadership Institute in 1979. Whereas in 2014, Mayor Vincent C. Gray changed the program's name to the Marion Berry Youth Leadership Institute to honor the late former mayor. Whereas the MBYLI is a year-round development program for district residents between the ages of 14 and 19 that focuses on personal growth and development skills, community development, college preparation, and college and career exploration. Whereas MBYLI youth leaders participate in intensive summer training and take the knowledge and skills learned over the summer and apply them throughout the school year. Whereas youth leaders plan and participate in a variety of projects and programs, including a public speaking competition, community forums, a youth government, publishing a newsletter, and community service projects. And whereas over the course of its 40 years in existence, the MBYLI has developed a strong and supportive alumni association comprised of thousands of program graduates. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education thanks the DC Department of Employment Services for its efforts in administering the Marion Berry Youth Leadership Institute on the occasion of its 40th anniversary. Be it further resolved that the State Board recognizes the strong and continued legacy of the MBYLI and its impact on generations of district students.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolutions?
Madam President.
Mr. Batchelor?
So clearly, this is a highlight of the meeting for me, both to recognize two programs that have done so much good for the young people in our city for the past 40 years, but also as a proud alumnus of both. I think, like I said, you know, there are a few things that I think allowed me to be where I am today. One is a loving community. Two is great teachers like Ms. Garcia, and the third is the Marion Barry Youth Leadership Institute. The Youth Leadership Institute is where I and many other young people, some present in the chambers today, were able to earn money for a first time, gain valuable work experience, and find their voice. And I'll say, you know, serving in the youth government at MBYLI as the city's 52nd youth mayor, and we have several other, I'm counting 3 former youth mayors in the room right now. That is where I found my passion for service and for local government, and every step of the way through my participation in the program, my employment, helping to enrich other young people in the program, and to this day, the folks associated with this program, the alumni and the participants, have given me so much strength, have propped me up, and have propelled me forward. And so I'm excited to recognize this group of youth leaders as well as the staff who support it to, you know, on this 40th anniversary, and to thank them for all they've done for me and for thousands of other young people in this city who might have taken a different direction if it wasn't for this opportunity. So thank you.
Other discussion?
Yes, I'd like to, as someone who taught for longer than most people in this room have been alive, and some of the students might not really recognize the impact that Marion Barry had on this city in a positive way. It was much more positive than a couple of negative things. But the summer youth program saved hundreds of thousands of lives in this city. And it can never be acknowledged enough to how important the summer youth program has been and will be for the youth of our city.
Madam President?
Yes.
While I was serving in the Mayor Gray administration in the Deputy Mayor for Education's office, I had the honor of getting to meet with the late Marion Barry before planning a community meeting in Ward 8, because he wanted to be sure he knew who was coming to his community and what exactly they wanted from his residents. And it was very clear to me in the opportunity I had to meet with the late mayor how fiercely he defended and stood up for the residents of Ward 8, including the young people. Recently, I was able to run into one of my former students who currently works with the Department of Employment Services on the Marion Barry Youth Leadership Initiative. And so I'm delighted to see that young people not only benefit from the program while they are in it, but are able to also participate in future further career level employment here in the district. So congratulations to you all. Thank you for all the work that you do. Very honored to be able to support you tonight.
Tatiana?
Good evening. I would first like to say congratulations for your recognition, and say it's time, because I know a lot of friends who are involved in this program, and I've worked with some people within the program, some staff, and I just know the wonderful things that go on behind the scenes, and oftentimes it could get unrecognized, but I'm just glad we're recognizing it.
Any others? So I just want to say that I've had the opportunity, really through Marcus, to meet some of the leaders of it, including Kemry Hughes and Phil Walker, who are here tonight. And I just want to say thank you so much. He talks about the program and you guys so much. And so thank you for everything that you've done for him and for so many others.
And Madam President, I also want to recognize the Associate Director for the Office of Youth Programs, Steny Freeman, who is also here from the Department of Employment Services, as well as the President of our Alumni Association, Mr. Norman Nixon, who's also a former director of the program. And our current youth mayor, Mr. Kieron Campbell, is also in the chamber.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further discussion, the vote is on approval of ceremonial resolutions 1917 and 1918. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Before we're going to take a 5-minute recess to present the resolutions. We will present the resolutions in order. Once your name is called by our staff, please meet the board members in front of the witness table. We're going to start with Dr. Faith Gibson Hubbard, but before everybody goes, everybody here has been tremendous and deserves these wonderful awards. And I also want to say John Paul Hayworth, who has read all of these, deserves some special award. I could never speak that many words that well, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so we'll start with Ms. Gibson Hubbard.
Practice. I practice it.
No, I'm joking. Hi, how are you doing?
How are you before you rest?
Sure.
Out of your way, because I'm here for something else, and you get an award like you should. Yeah. All right, we ready?
ESSA. Members of the ESSA task force, if you can come over here, please, so we can get you on to the next picture.
Oh, she's on ESSA too. She can just stay. This is great. Maybe if two of you could be on that side, that'd be great. And
Mr. Ward, you next. Thank you. Mr. Ward, we have a chair right here.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. McCormick.
call this down photographer here. Let you guys get yours first, and then I'll get this. Sorry, you got it. All right. Thank you. That is. Thank you, guys. I gotta get this brother too.
I'll take it real quick and then
Flood the booth. The booth flood.
you guys get crowded on either side and then try to be as narrow as possible.
Oh my God, you're funny. But I'm just...
Thank you. Everyone out front.
Supposed to be Purple Day. Lots of people in purple today. We called each other.
Yeah.
See, no one calls me.
I think it's Friday.
What's up? I have cough drops. I may Fraser told me he could smell my lunch.
Oh, that's gross.
I may have gum too. Let me check. And now he's made me self-conscious about it.
I don't know if that's
For Friday.
Thank you. Yes, of course, no problem.
What are you giving out?
Cough drops.
Oh, yeah. I guess, oh yeah, oh, so that's the trick. I think I'm gonna announce that. That's the...
Don't tell my tricks.
All right. Actually, it's a good one.
Mike's still on, so
Oh.
gavel on.
This meeting of the State Board will come back to order. The State Board welcomes public participation in activities under our authority. At every public meeting, we begin with testimony from public witnesses on education-related matters. Your comments will become part of our official record. If you are a member of the public and would like to speak at a future public meeting, please contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by calling 202-471-0888. Tonight we have 4 public witnesses. If witnesses have provided written comments for the record, they are available on our website. We will have 1 panel of public witnesses tonight. As I call your name, please come down to the table. The panel will be Laura Fuchs, Washington Teachers Union Co-Chair, Laura Derrendinger, Ward 3 resident, Stacy Stryer, ParkRxAmerica.org, and Jezelle Estrado, Empower Ed teacher leader. You each have 3 minutes to speak this evening. Please note that you must use your mic. Your mic is already on, and the staff have placed the mics where they will pick you up if you sit back in your seats. You do not need to lean into them or move the mics. The light on the table will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, will turn yellow for the last 30, and will turn red after 3 minutes have elapsed. We will begin on your left, my right. Please begin when you are ready.
All right, my name is Laura Fuchs. I'm a Ward 5 resident and teach in DC Public Schools for the past 12 years. Just got reelected to the Executive Board of the Washington Teachers Union, as well as the Ward 7 Education Council and Empower DC. I say all that to say that I have a lot of experience talking with teachers from around the city and would like to testify in favor of the tabled resolution in favor of the resolution on implementation of working group proposals. I'm in full agreement with the focal points of teacher retention, access to social studies, and science instruction in the lower grades, and I'm interested to see what a social studies standards exploration could lead to. So I guess take this maybe for future thought. I do want to thank the board in particular for highlighting the effects of teacher churn on the students in our schools throughout this past year. The powerful testimonies of our SBOE student representatives provided the real impact on students' lives that an ever-changing workforce has. People always look at me with surprise when I say I've been at HD Woodson for the past 12 years. Over my teaching career, I've seen countless educators come and go, whether they bounce from school to school or leave the district altogether. I have testified a lot about the effects this has on the building culture and students' attitudes towards schooling, as well as the positive effects I've seen because of my time spent at the same school. What I've not talked as extensively about is the stability makes everyone's lives easier and allows us to focus on the hard work of improving our schools for our students. One of my responsibilities at HD Woodson is to oversee our advanced placement courses. From recruiting and preparing our students to ordering and administering exams, there are a lot of hours that go into making sure our students have a seamless experience. Over my 4 years of taking on this duty, our school has developed rituals and expectations for how the year will go, leading to every single course having over 95% exam attendance this year, and most courses having 100% exam attendance. A huge part of how we were so successful in convincing all our students to show up and take a 3-hour-plus exam in May was because every teacher in our program had taught the same AP courses the year before at HD Woodson. I didn't have to convince anyone of why we were encouraging all of our students to take the exam. Teachers knew how to scaffold the expectations for how to take the exam, as well as prepare them for the content and the rigor of the test. We all knew that it would take, or what it would take, to get the students through the door as early as 7:30 in the morning and feeling as prepared as possible and with the mental fortitude to take the entire exam. Stability is a large part of what made this possible. Without stability, we are constantly training up, having to go through growing pains, and constantly starting over and over again. As a teacher leader, it can be very demoralizing when all that hard work goes out the window because a teacher leaves the school. And then as an upper grade social studies teacher, I'm definitely interested in seeing what happens with social studies, and I'm happy to participate in any way that would be helpful.
Computers in classrooms contribute to poor learning. My name is Laura Derrendinger. I'm a mother of 4 young children here in Washington, D.C. I'm a registered nurse with extensive public health experience. Independent research has not validated that iPads, tablets, laptops, or smartboards are effective teaching tools. Research discusses education, health, and privacy concerns connected to children using electronic devices. The precautionary principle suggests we have enough data now showing harm and no robust independent data showing benefit, so it is prudent to pause on and reflect on the use of electronic devices by our children. For education, studies replicated to verify interpretations and suggest that as more screen-based electronic devices enter classrooms, learning declines. This is a trend in the United States, as well as in 70 industrialized countries where there has been an uptake in computers in the classroom. Reading comprehension decreases when material is read from a screen. Digital devices in classrooms have so far increased the achievement gap for low-income populations. The marketing technique and promise that giving more iPads and computers to children in classrooms will bridge the digital divide is not backed by research. For health, abundant research suggests that there are negative health outcomes that accompany electronic device use by children. Physical brain changes viewed on MRI brain scans suggest relationships with behavior, poor mental health, depression, and an extremely concerning association with the addictive properties associated with screens. Eyesight changes, obesity, sleep disturbances, and hearing loss. Regarding privacy law concerns, when internet screen-based platforms are put in front of our students for required schoolwork or testing, what data is collected on our students and families, and how is it used? Concluding, let's ask many questions each time we consider putting more electronics into schools. The best results for our children will come from independent research focused on education outcomes. Research is strong enough to warrant measures to protect children by removing devices from schools or at least significantly limiting how they are used now. Our society considers it unethical to put medical devices or drugs on the market without vigorous, independent study showing they are safe and effective, especially for children. Independent data right now tells us that using more electronics is not a solution to help our children learn. Independent scientific data shows that being outside leads to better education outcomes. For centuries, our best scientists understood that a walk outside was worth a week in the laboratory in helping them progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stryer.
My name is Stacy Stryer, and I'm a pediatrician in Maryland, a consultant with Montgomery County Public Schools, and an advocate working with ParkRxAmerica, a nonprofit organization that teaches how and why to write PARK prescriptions for children and adults. I'm very passionate about nature's benefits to physical, mental, and academic health. Today, children only spend an average of 4 to 7 minutes in free time outdoors, yet over 6 hours a day in front of a screen. This is associated with increased obesity, diabetes in children, stress, and mental health problems. Over 9% of children in the U.S. are diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Greater than 50% of mental illness begins by age 14, and 20% of students report they've been bullied. Sadly, suicide rates are on the rise, and it's the second leading cause of death among those aged 10 to 24. As a pediatrician, I'm evidence-based focused. When I talk about nature, it doesn't necessarily mean Yosemite or Shenandoahs. It can be a nearby park, backyard trees, or a fantastic mud puddle. Studies show that students with a view of nature from their classroom do better on academic tests and are less fatigued than those without a view or with a view of a structure. Access to nature in an educational setting improves test scores, attentiveness, creativity, and reduces attention deficit symptoms. Schools that use outdoor classrooms and other forms of nature-based experiential education have significantly improved test scores than those who don't. And a walk in nature improves some aspects of executive function in preschoolers and elementary students more than an urban walk. And data shows outdoor time does not detract from academic learning. Nature improves mental health and well-being also. It increases rejuvenation after a fatiguing task, improves behavior, enhances social skills and cooperation. One study done looked at 255 at-risk 6th grade students and compared the impact of a week-long outdoor program to a control group. The outdoor group had a 27% increase in mastery of science concepts and significantly enhanced cooperation, conflict resolution skills, self-esteem, behavior, and motivation to learn. Another study done in rural New York found that girls living closer to a green space had decreased anxiety and depression and increased resiliency and sense of well-being over those who did not live near a green space. Unfortunately, exposure to nature is not equal, with those in urban settings and lower socioeconomic classes drawing the short end of the straw. School systems around the country are beginning to recognize the importance of nature and inequities within certain groups and are making changes. Oakland Unified School District's Board of Education recently passed 2 policies and are working with others to design living schoolyards in all their public schools. Locally, ParkRxAmerica received a grant to train school staff on the use of PARK prescriptions in DC schools. As you plan for the future, I encourage you to take into account the incredible benefits of nature and as opposed to allowing children to sit in front of a screen hours a day.
Thank you very much. Ms. Estrado.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening. My name is Jezelle Estrado. I'm a DC charter school teacher, and I'm here tonight representing the DC Teacher Leadership Organization, ParkRxAmerica. Tonight I'm here to discuss how we believe the State Board of Education can best play a role in supporting the improvement of teaching and learning in DC. DC continues to experience persistent and unacceptable achievement gaps, and if we believe, as we do, that all students can learn, that means the problem that needs addressing are actually the gaps in opportunity and access. So the question becomes, what are the differences in context that create the outcome differences we see on paper? In order to get a better understanding of where our outcome gaps may in fact come from, ParkRxAmerica conducted a survey last week sent to at least 1 teacher in 30 DC schools. In our survey, we asked teachers to identify what they felt were the largest contributors to our current achievement gap. Respondents were allowed to select their top 3. The The largest factor selected at 50% was a lack of culturally responsive approaches to teaching. We applaud the Social Studies Standards Working Group for prioritizing culturally relevant and explicitly anti-racist standards in the coming revision. 1/3 of respondents highlighted a lack of instructional leadership. In our survey, 90% said they felt they had either a pretty good grasp or an excellent grasp of the learning standards, but when asked if they had received adequate training in how to use the standards to inform lesson planning and instruction, just 31% said yes, absolutely, with the rest experiencing varying degrees of lesser support. Teachers like myself want to provide high-quality instructions to their students, and there is great interest in how we can provide learning experiences that are both more enriching and challenging and more culturally responsive. Just yesterday, the Center for Inspired Teaching released an excellent report called The Engagement Gap, which highlights that wealthy students are far more likely to have access to engagement-based education than low and middle-income students of color. The report highlights 3 recommendations. 1, building strong relationships through an asset-based approach to working with students. 2, honor and center students' funds of knowledge and ways of working with students. And 3, engage students with learning experiences that are meaningful to them and that bring them joy. Based on strong research, this demonstrates that what in fact leads to better student outcomes is increased student engagement, such that effective teaching strategies can take root. We agree with these recommendations because education is fundamentally a human enterprise. The next year, Empower Ed will also be highlighting the extensive research that shows that the schools who do the best educating those children that are furthest behind are those that focus on establishing professional adult culture first. John Sapphire, head of research for better teaching, has spent decades working with schools and districts across America. He said recently that for years he worked with schools asking them to implement research-proven, data-driven approaches to better teaching and learning, and then didn't understand why they work beautifully for some and not at all for others. Then he discovered the secret: professional adult culture. Sapphire calls professional culture the sine qua non of school improvement. Without it, nothing else is successful. So as you consider approaches to improving teaching and learning, we ask this board to consider answering these questions. Do we have a culture of growth and support for both teachers and principals? How can we reduce teacher course loads and increase instructional staff to better meet individual students' needs? And finally, what more can we do to update our standards and provide more culturally relevant pedagogy for our students? Thank you for your time.
Thank you all very much for your testimony. We're going to have a round of questions from members, insofar as people want to raise questions. And the way that works is each member has 3 minutes, and that includes both their question, comment, and your responses. So it's in everybody's interest to be concise. Okay, any questions, comments? And let me say, and Jean Paul is going to call on people and time them.
Mr. Jacobson. Dr. O'Leary.
Just call the people who want to.
Yes, I have questions for everyone. Ms. Fuchs, could you talk a little bit more about the scaffolding about AP? And I'd like to commend Ms. Fuchs for being a first-time AP reader. She just got back from Salt Lake City, and I'm sure that she had a fabulous professional experience there. But how is the scaffolding that you're talking about, and where does it start, in what grade?
Well, I'm a full-time teacher, so I don't get any time off to do my AP administrative duties. So, and we're also on a lot of different committees. We're kind of over meetings at our school at the moment. So, I mean, admittedly, it's probably not where we want it to be in terms of getting an opportunity to really scaffold across all the disciplines, because we do offer AP courses in all the disciplines. And I just don't have the capacity to go to every course and try to help them with AP scaffolding at the moment. What I will say at Woodson, what we really pride ourselves on is we do not limit our courses, and we really have worked very hard to offer it to a wide array of students, so that it's not just our top students taking a bunch of AP courses, but that we actually have kind of a wide range of kids taking 1 or 2. At least once before they graduate. So we really do try to structure that. That does make it difficult on our teachers sometimes, because some students walk in not realizing that they're in AP and that this is about to be kind of different than maybe what they're used to. So we do work together to, at least in our own classes, figure out kind of how to meet students where they're at in each content area and how to try to get them as close as we can to feeling at least the best that they can on the tests.
Thank you. Ms. Derrendinger, electronic devices are used in some schools are not allowed, so the students have to turn their phones in before they come into the building. In other schools that doesn't happen. And there are benefits for students using electronic devices in the classroom. How do we get it so that it's better? And you've got 40 seconds to answer.
The teachers that I've spoke to, those are that's what I can speak from. And actually, a very good way to answer that question, I referenced at the end of my statement an excerpt from Matt Miles and Joe Clement that are two high school teachers who've written a book called Screen Schooled, and they have proposed very good ways that we're not saying don't have electronics in the classroom, but it really should account for perhaps 3 to 5% of the time when it's going to be used to complement everything else. And they actually came up with a formula in your head to think of, is what you're going to propose in the digital platform actually a better delivery of the information than non-digitally as their template.
Thank you.
Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. So first I want to say thank you to Ms. Estrado and Ms. Fuchs for your comments on the Social Studies Working Group. I'll be leading that work with my colleagues on the board, and I'm very excited to include both of you in the conversations as we go forward. We're still at the point of doing a lot of research right now on how other states have done it, appropriate timelines, how we would form a group to advise us, but I'm looking forward to working hopefully with both of you. I wanted to direct my questions around the use of devices in the outdoor time. So in my ward, in Ward 6, we've had a lot of parent activism around access to technology, because one of the things we know in the city is that access to technology is inequitable. That a number of students come to school as digital natives. They've already used devices. They're familiar with how they work. They can pick up a phone and know exactly what to do with it, and other students have not. So how do we balance calls for use of technology in classrooms as an equity gap closer with the kind of concerns that you both proposed about the need for students to spend more time outdoors and away from devices?
I think briefly, the marketing myth that I referred to, that children need access and interaction with devices, we need to have education broadly in our communities, again, the data doesn't support that. And we need to start with that platform so that parents understand that their children will not be left behind because they don't carry around an electronic device in or out of the classroom. And that's a good place that's going to be where we need to start.
And I can speak about the outdoor time, which is indirectly related, because when you're outside, you don't have your screen in front of you. But the studies have shown that time outdoors actually improves learning. You can imagine science classes being held outside. I mean, kids are more excited about learning. They want to go outside again. They want to repeat it. And when they're outside in nature and then they go back in, behavioral problems are decreased, and their ability to learn and rejuvenation is better. You know, they're less fatigued. They're able to concentrate better. So even though it's not directly related to the tablet, it is related to it. And these studies are shown, and I think more and more schools around the country are picking up on this and learning about it and increasing the amount of outdoor time. It also improves a lot of life skills, socialization skills, cooperation, and this is being shown in studies also.
Great, thank you all. I'll use the last 30 seconds just to share that last night I had the opportunity to meet with the Ward 6 Public School Parent Organization, and we talked about new time allocations and recommendations for master scheduling guidance for elementary school to include the Healthy Schools Act recommendations about increasing both time outdoors as well as physical education time. And this was a big topic of interest to the parents in the room, and a conversation I think that will continue throughout the city, certainly within my ward. And I'm very eager to take back some of what was shared here about the park prescriptions in particular, and thinking about how we get our young people in more nature environments more often. Thank you.
Ms. MacLeay.
Good evening. I want to just direct 2 quick comments to Dr. Stryer and Ms. Derrendinger.
Derrendinger is fine.
There you go. So thank you very much for being passionate advocates and coming tonight to talk about lower screen time as well as being outdoors. As advocate of both of these things, I've worked over the past several years to connect both schools with nonprofits such as Living Classrooms, among others here in the city, to make sure that we have more outdoor educational offerings to our students. Just a recent study that came out that says just touching dirt, okay, can help lower your stress. It also leads to better increases in mental health stability, as well as being outdoors helps your physical activity, which is something that this board has looked at our physical education standards and making sure that schools are adhering to them. As well as goes into nutritional, education and obesity. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much again for being here this evening, talking about the need for less screen time. We've even seen parents such as Bill Gates did not let his own children have screen time. With that, I don't have questions. We've heard a lot of questions tonight. I just want to say thank you again.
Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. I have questions for you all, but I'll start with Ms. Estrado and Ms. Fuchs. I think this overlaps somewhat. I'm interested to know, Ms. Estrado, you I think addressed this a little bit with your recommendations, but I would like to know a little bit more about what it is that you think is hindering teachers from teaching and or bringing in culturally relevant practices. And I guess for Ms. Fuchs, I think, if you could speak a little bit to the social studies standards as they are now and to that part of, are you able to use them? So, yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Sure. Just what are some of the hindrances that you see in your work to teachers bringing culturally relevant practices into the classroom? Are there things that we could do to remove those obstacles?
Sure. I believe that one of the hindrances is just the inability for teachers to collaborate with each other. Oftentimes also it's really dependent on the school culture and what the professional culture is in the building. We definitely believe if teachers have the ability to go outside of their classrooms, visit each other's classrooms, have an opportunity to collaborate with each other, and have a ability to have some type of discord, that will increase their ability to bring more culturally relevant pedagogy into their classroom.
So as far as social studies goes, and this would just be for DCPS because I don't really know how different LEAs operate. DCPS has gotten stricter in terms of trying to get us to stick to a course pacing guide. It used to be really purely voluntary, and really kind of meant probably for new teachers who weren't as familiar maybe with the subject that they were teaching to use, as well as materials that they could use. And then kind of with impact, in the teacher evaluation, it got a little stricter. So like, for example, depending on my administrator, I would take a hit if I was kind of refusing to follow the scope and sequence, which I do, because I do view world history too as a white supremacist course, and I'm not gonna teach it that way. And I've told them that, and I'm very open about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, but it's too Euro-centered and I can't do it. I think World II is so much broader than just European history and how Europe affected the world. And so I need my students to get an opportunity to see other cultures aside from Europe on a roll. But that means I'm way off scope and sequence. I stick to the standards, I just do them in a different order and in a different time frame. So they do hit all the standards because why not? They're there. But I'm not going to spend half my time on Europe when there's a whole big world out there to be studying. So there are some limits, but DCPS does not force my school to force me to do that. It kind of depends on the admin person who's decided I should be on this standard that day. But also, it's not a big enough hit to not be worth it. Like, I can keep my job and do it, but I won't get a bonus.
Thank you.
Ms. Alicia. Ms. Williams.
I don't have so much a question because spending a lot of my career in early childhood education, I really am against the use of tablets and other devices to train. I much rather concentrate on the critical thinking, creativity, self-reliance skills that we had in our environment. And but I want to say that I appreciate you bringing this issue before the board because a lot of people are not aware of the detriment of having electronic devices for young children. So thank you.
Mr. Parker. Ms. Robinson.
Hello. I'm sorry, I don't want to pronounce your name wrong.
Derrendinger.
Thank you. So for the schools, especially in DC, who support having ratios of 1-to-1 in terms of technology, how do you suggest they find the balance between ensuring that students have that technology to ensure there are different types of learning and just making sure that it's not too much?
So we have to go back to something to discuss it in terms of the marketing from the private companies that are profiting from selling these to our schools and to us. The marketing has been very successful to convince us that this is actually necessary. A one-to-one, one student, one device is not necessary. When we look at our students, our children, what we need to be successful moving forward, again, I'm quoting the teachers who wrote this book. They say that the World Economic Forum's most recent report says that the 10 essential skills that people need to be successful in the workplace include complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, critically thinking, emotional intelligence, judgment, decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. And none of these aforementioned skills require training on a device.
And just one more question. With the world becoming rapidly evolving and most jobs being dependent on technology, how do we ensure that students still get that basic training that they need with technology to ensure that they'll be comfortable in the workplace when they get older?
I completely understand that we want to all be ready for the workforce. And another one of the industry tricks that I've learned, I've done this research for the past year, is that the people that design this technology design it to be intuitive. And if you're not able to figure it out in 3 minutes or less when they do their marketing studies, they go back to the drawing board to make it even easier for us to learn. So I'd say, don't worry. You are going to be able to figure it out when you're an adult when you need to use it. The real skills you need are the ones that I listed in that quote. The technology itself, the devices, are designed that you're able to figure it out. So the PowerPoint, for example, the PowerPoint presentation that I know a lot of fourth graders are already required to give, the real skills is going to be able to engage and communicate and make eye contact with people. Actually making a PowerPoint presentation, when you really need to, when your employer requires it, you'll be able to figure that out in 5 to 10 minutes without having to spend too much school time using that.
Thank you.
Mr. Batchelor.
Thank you. As a follow-up to Representative Robinson's question, one of the centerpieces of making sure that our young people are tech literate is for the administering of our standardized tests, right? And what I know as the Ward 8 representative is for some of our students, the barrier to performing better on our standardized tests is not necessarily their mastery of the content, but some of the basic functions of technology like drag and drop and some of those things. So my question is twofold. One, I think back to that question, how do we make sure that our students are prepared to do that? But if not, if you're saying that that's an unnecessary skill at this point, are you also suggesting that we should move away from administering our standardized tests electronically?
When we look at the data, and I'm assuming reading comprehension is one of the aspects of a standardized test, and even reading comprehension to understand a math question, we have, the data tells us, that's been repeated many times studying this, reading comprehension declines when it's read on a screen. So that might be a question, a very good question to ask.
Anything else? And I'll just say to Ms. Estrado, thank you for your particular focus on culturally competent instruction. I think a lot of our motivation for investigating further reforming our social studies standards and focusing on social studies was because of a very palpable desire from students we talked to, as well as educators, to make sure that the curriculum that they have, the standards that they're expected to meet in the classroom is also connecting with the students that they're serving. And our students say that, you know, they've become less interested in some subjects because they don't see themselves in the narrative, right? They don't see themselves in the history books. They don't see themselves as a part of what they're being taught. And so I know that that will be a particular focus of Dr. Sutter's as we begin this work to look at our social studies standards. So thank you for that. And also thank you, Ms. Fuchs and the panelists.
President Wattenberg.
I also want to direct my remarks to begin with to Ms. Derrendinger. I'm really glad that you raised this because I think this issue of too much technology in the schools is a huge one. I think part of what you're hearing, let me go back. I went to a couple of meetings that were sponsored by our previous chancellor on technology in the schools. And what struck me was how different the response was from different neighborhoods, because there's a lot, I think I take very much your point, I read some of this literature that the promises about tech and how they help education are not nearly as great as what people think, and yet, as a number of people have said, and I want to read what you have sent us to, but it does seem to me that people need some familiarity with it to go out into the world. And somewhere in there is a balance. And we really need to talk about it. And I very much agree with you that it's just being assumed that it's a very good thing. And DCPS has now adopted this one-to-one, and I think it's going to make possible some very interesting and creative options in the classrooms, but I think it's really, really important for it to be evaluated and for it to be looked at and understood as not, you know, nothing that you just stick in the classrooms turns out to be perfectly good. And I think this is a really important one that needs to be looked at closely, and I'm glad that you raised it. On the recess question, how can I be that late? Am I done?
No, go ahead.
No, on the recess question, I was just going to ask whether you had any specific information about DC, because it is a huge issue. All of us hear it all the time about how kids are prevented from going to recess because they're involved in different kinds of preparation in order to take, you know, different tests or meet certain standards or whatever. So curious if you have.
So I don't have any information specifically on DC, but I do know that there's a big push right now. I'm working with counselors in Montgomery County and other areas where the kids who don't have time to go to recess or who held back from recess because of behavioral problems or as a punishment, it's probably the exact opposite of what they need. So when they get out and they're able to kind of play outside and get into nature, their behavior actually improves. So, you know, really we should be training and teaching our staff in DC on what to do instead of withholding kids from recess. And we're also talking to counselors about kids with other issues and other groups and getting them outside, taking a walk outside instead of holding a group inside to hold a session, like, you know, whatever, you know, there are various groups that they have, hold it outside, having outdoor garden. So it's not just recess, but it's finding other ways and finding ways to do outdoor classrooms and outdoor teaching.
I do want to give a shout out to the gardening program that exists in a lot of the DC schools. I guess you've seen it. They're terrific. They're really, really terrific.
If I could just follow up to your comment about how to make that balance and that DC is moving to a one-to-one. What's fantastic and positive is that right now we have an opportunity that it hasn't yet fully started and rolled out. And I've been part of a working group, it's called the Screens in Schools Working Group, for the past year, which is composed of people from here, literally to Seattle and Alaska and Canada, that are now suffering the consequences of the one-to-one initiatives they've had with all of their students, starting from kindergarten, first grade, elementary through middle. They're doing a lot of problematic remediation work now because the one-to-one initiative happened. And I would welcome any of you to be in touch with this working group to sort of, before this jump happens, look at what are the lessons learned, because even right here next to us in Montgomery County, Arlington County, Alexandria, this has already been going on for quite a few years, and we can learn from our neighbors.
All right. Thank you all very much for coming and joining us and giving us your time. All right, I am moving on to the Student Advisory Committee report. Each year, the State Board welcomes 2 students to sit with us on the dais. They both disappeared, okay. And represent their peers in our work. Tonight is the last official meeting of our colleagues, Tatiana Robinson of Ballou High School and Marjorie Alicia of Capital City Public Charter School. In addition to serving on the State Board, we also empower our student representatives to co-chair the Student Advisory Committee, or the SAC. The SAC meets monthly through each school year and discusses items of importance to students in the district. These discussions are investigated by the Student Advisory Committee and turned into a report presented to the State Board each June. I would invite our student reps to take their seats at the witness table and for other members of the Student Advisory Committee to join them in the front row. We really look forward to hearing your voices tonight. Please begin when you are ready.
That was our introduction. No, just kidding. Good evening, board, audience, staff. We are the small but mighty Student Advisory Committee and student representatives. In terms of presenting tonight, we're going to start with 2 members from our Student Advisory Committee telling you which committee they sat on and the work they've contributed and just their personal testimony on working with their peers to bring things back and things of that sort. And then you'll hear from me and Marjorie on presenting what we put in our final report.
Good evening, all. My name is Aaliyah Dick. I attend Woodrow Wilson High School. I just graduated, actually. I was about to say I'm a senior. This past year on the SAC, I've worked with the Inequity in Schools group. With my peers, we've brainstormed what we believe the reasons of inequities in school. We've also done some research on the web, and we've carried out surveys and questionnaires to try to gather just that from our peers. And I guess today we're here to present what we found to you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Hannah Dunn. I also graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School this past Saturday. So I too have been, I was on the Student Advisory Committee for the past 2 years, and I've had the pleasure of working with Marjorie on the School Inequity project. And I believe our work has really been focused on not only as a part of the committee being student voices, but also reaching out to peers in our schools to get their input on what they believe are the causes of inequity in schools so that we can close the gap in achievement for certain students. And so through our research and also creating videos to get actual student opinions of what they believe is school inequity and what is the causes, we were able to provide a presentation that Marjorie will talk more about.
All right. My name is, again, Tatiana Robinson. I am an alumni as of yesterday of Ballou High School, and I will be attending the University of Miami in the fall of 2019. And I chaired the teacher retention working group on the committee.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marjorie Elisa, and I chaired the Inequity in Schools group, and I will be attending SUNY Oswego this fall. So yeah, and this is my first year as well being a student representative on the State Board of Education. And yeah, just this year I learned a lot. I grew a lot as a person as well, through just learning more about education by when sitting on the state board. Just gave me more of an outlook of what a student can do and what's going on at the moment and how it should be improved and what should be kept. So I will be talking about the reasons behind inequity in schools. Some of the reasons of inequity in schools are caused by lack of training within the staff, lack of training within the school system, not knowing how to tend and focus on the needs of the variety of students that attend the school, no matter what school they are. Also kind of like the location of the schools. Some schools are in, more of a richer location, and some schools are in a poorer location, which the students, which show kind of like the lack of opportunity within those two, I guess, economic groups within where the schools are located, which is a big problem. And, students can really see how that kind of affects them and just, like I said, brings down their self-esteem, and it's just a lack of opportunities that come with that as well. Also just donations to like parent-teachers associations, parent-teacher student organizations. Because of that, those organizations or associations can't really do a lot to better their students and as well as their involvement within the school community as well.
And another thing with the PTAs, oftentimes you see at schools like Wilson, they have a strong PTA. They fund the school dances and different things within the community, while at other schools, you barely have any parents coming to the meetings. And it just shows, even if those types of schools with the PTAs don't get as much funding, they're still better off because they have those donations from that group.
Also, as well, just testing opportunities for such as the PARK testing, the PSAT, the SAT, where some students in some schools don't have like any sort of after-school practice testing or classes held within the school to give them the opportunity to better their testing when these standardized tests, come upon their school life and everything. And like Tatiana said, she just mentioned right now, parent involvement. For me, I just would like to speak on my experience within that. Like, for example, my mom, English is not her first language, so just any sort of organization or meetings like that, she wouldn't be able to really contribute because the schools didn't really allow any opportunities for a bilingual speaker to attend, to kind of just tend to those families who don't have that access, which is very important as well, because that's how a lot of parents don't get involved within their students' school life, and which it does reflect on how much the student can grow, and like I said, their self-esteem, as well as just having like opportunities where parents can also contribute and attend, where some parents, they work 2 jobs. They don't even have time to, come home and eat. They have to go straight to their job. So being able to tend to those needs where all parents have the access to come to these organizations and, be involved and actually make a change in their students' school life, where sometimes they can't because all of the barriers that come in their way. But if schools, help tend to these sort of problems, it will make a big difference in how the school can improve socially and economically.
And with that being said, you also have to take into consideration another thing with inequity is oftentimes at schools, some schools make the parents feel less than, which makes them uncomfortable to come and, contribute to their schools. So we have to keep that in mind. And oftentimes where you see those parents being mistreated, it's in the often poorer parts of the city. Next, the top reasons behind teacher retention that we found when doing research, when interviewing teachers, talking to our fellow students, just looking into things that the board has done this year, we found one thing in the top 5 is the work environment. And when we say that, some teachers feel that they can't operate in the types of environments that they are in, either because of student behavior or the way communication is between the way communication is between administration and the teachers and things of that sort. Again, communication from administration is a struggle. Oftentimes, teachers say that they don't feel support from administration, especially, for example, when doing things like disciplining kids. They're not backed up by administration, so it kind of seems like a mockery to some of them. And we won't put any names out because we want to keep it, we want to make keep it confidential. But when talking to a teacher who went from one of our schools to another on the committee, they talked about how they didn't feel that support, and they didn't feel that they were being taken serious when they wrote referrals for students, because the administration had just sent them back to class the next day without no apology, without no type of discipline. They just felt that they were being taken as a joke. So we just have to ensure that support is there for teachers. Another big thing that we all know about is impact. Teachers feel pressured to, just accommodate to what the district wants to see, and they don't feel flexible enough to be able to do what they feel should be done in order for students to learn. And then the last issue that we found was personal issues. I can give you an example. My teacher went out because she said that while working at Ballou, it was mental health issues that she was dealing with, and she didn't want it to affect the students, so she felt that it was best that she left, and that was affected in our retention rate because she left the school in the middle of the school year.
Okay. And some causes for school inequity are children feeling very abandoned, children just, students just feeling that, because their friend in this other school has more opportunities than them, just creates a low self-esteem and just creates a lack of performance in the student's school life, which will affect their grades and any future plans that come their way because of just this sort of atmosphere and environment they're surrounded with, because they feel like they're not getting the same opportunities as other students in other schools. Also, lack of funding, like I mentioned before, lack of funding and training of teachers, staff, to kind of be able to tend to these students when they do feel this sort of change, and just like like I said, just seeing how other students in other schools do have more opportunities in them, and being able to accommodate them throughout all schools. So having that sort of guideline available so the teachers can be a part of will go a long way as well. And as well as schools having insufficient amount of funds in their budget, which kind of prevents them from doing any sort of further steps to improve these problems. Lastly, like I said before, it's just the location of the schools. So if the school is in a poor location, they won't have funds, they won't have any sort of opportunities outside of the school area to actually help fix these problems, whereas schools in rich areas will have abundance of funding and can do a lot more, and which shows again the inequity across all schools. Some of the main factors with school inequity are fairness, not being able to, like I said, have the equal opportunities with students no matter their economic class, their gender, or their legal status. So with that, it does show a lot of school inequity. And lastly, inclusion, just including all sorts of students, all sorts of staff, all sorts of opportunities, and just distributing them through any sort of students, no matter their academic performance, no matter if they do sports and if they're not good in their academic life, just providing that sort of opportunity throughout all the students, where it shows that all of them are receiving the same opportunities, no matter what their qualifications are and everything. So yeah.
I'm going to touch briefly on what Marjorie said. She made a good point about access to opportunities, which is, I feel, is a very important topic when it comes to school inequity. And that's just access to any opportunities, from being able to take a variety of AP exams or IB programs, depending on the school that you go to the access to after-school extracurriculars, from being able simply to starting a club to joining a varsity sport and participating in those opportunities. I feel like that's a very essential part of being in high school and being prepared for your either career or college education.
And based off of a survey that we conducted, some students, 50% of the students responded that quality of school and opportunities is one of the effects of schools that have inequity. So because of that, many of them won't have the opportunities, and which shows of, you know, where some of them may be able to go to in their future education, or just what's accessible to them in and outside of the school community, which, you know, doesn't allow them to be very involved or not knowing about these other opportunities because their school doesn't give them access to them and everything. As well in the survey, we asked, what do you think are the top causes of school inequity? And 50% of the students says, like, in their testing, their scores can vary from being low to high because, like I said, some schools will have more programs and after-school classes where students can take to, you know, practice some of these rigorous exams that, you know, kind of determine where they can apply to, where can they not apply to for further education. And like I said, it, you know, doesn't allow them to have the same opportunities and everything. And also 35% of them talked about parent involvement is also one of the causes of school inequity, like, because like how we said before, some parents aren't really included, some parents don't have the same accessibility and time to be able to involve in these programs because there isn't enough you know, help for them to actually be involved. And so yeah. And lastly, some effects of inequity is lower test scores, lower graduation rates, lower college acceptances, dropout rates can increase, quality of school and opportunities for the students, for them to come in and for them to actually gain access to any opportunities in and outside of school. Lack of home technology, because like we said before in some of the testimonies, some students need to have these sort of technologies in their home to actually do their homework and everything, but if some of them don't have the money, don't have access to any of these things, which, you know, will cause them to, you know, their grades to drop, them not being able to do work, and it affects their school performance. And lastly, emotional support. You know, a lot of students will notice all of these changes and compare their school to other schools, and just, you know, it kind of brings their self-esteem down because, you know, it's going to affect what they can do, what sort of opportunities they can have to actually improve what they could do later on. So yeah.
And we're going to wrap it up. We're sorry. It's just hard to sum up everything we did for the year in a couple minutes. Yeah. No. But on the teacher retention group, unfortunately, I'm the only one here, so I'm the only one who could really speak to it. But we had interviews with different teachers from different schools, and I just wanted to share a few testimonials and quotes from the teachers. They said, a lot of people don't think of teachers as a person. And when they said that they felt that they were being treated unfairly within their schools, they were targeted with impact, and not only that, they just felt like they had to accommodate to what only the administration said, or that they were out. They didn't have the flexibility to do what they felt that they needed to do to accommodate to those students that needed additional supports in order to be successful in school. Next, lack of teachers equals lack of learning. You're trying to get rid of teachers who you say are not qualified. You have highly ineffective, you get rid of teachers who you say are ineffective after their first year, but those can be the teachers who turn out to be the greatest teachers and stay for 40 years if you give them a chance. And when we share the recommendations at the end, you'll hear that we have an idea of a mentor program to help those teachers. But yeah. And teachers are more than just employees. They are creating the future. This is literally true because these students will be the future, will be your next president, things of that sort. So if you're not pouring into them what they need now, then they become the people that you call a menace to society, or they become the people that you say are a bother in your community. Without a consistent teacher, students can struggle to learn and apply skills. That quote came from me. I don't know if you guys heard us on the Kojo show, but this just goes to show that when you don't have the consistent teachers and new teachers come in, every teacher wants to start where they want to begin a new lesson. The lesson can be on addition. One teacher might want to start on adding 1 + 1, while another teacher might want to start on adding 2 + 2. And you just have to balance those skills, and it's hard to do that when it's an inconsistent teacher and they don't know the levels of each student in the classroom. And lastly, students show higher growth academically when they have the same teachers and those teachers actually move on with the students. When we said that, we meant that, again, those teachers know their students, they know the levels, they know the way they like to learn, whether they're a visual learner or auditory learner, so you don't waste time in the classroom catering to each student's needs when you already know what the students need in order to be successful in the classroom. Lastly, the SAC provided recommendations in our final report to the board. This included, you can follow us. Listing the resources that each school needs and creating a plan to allocate them across all schools, giving each school not what they want, but what they actually need. When we said this, everyone is saying we're losing money, we're losing this, we're losing that, but we actually need to find out what those schools need in order to be successful. At this point, it's going to be hard to reach a point of equality. We need equity, and with that, we need just what each school needs, not what they want to be successful. If we have just enough, then we'll have those schools and wards like Ward 8 and Ward 7 to be able to compete with the other wards to be successful. Next, conducting a series of surveys and conversations for students to give input on these issues and how to fix them. When I talked to my peers this school year about like being on the board and about their recommendations, a lot of them didn't even want to answer the questions because they feel that they never have input to give for their own education. And so we just have to ensure that we are always going to students to give input on what affects them, because then they draw away from it and they don't really care when really they should, because it's their future. Ensuring effective communication tactics are put into place for teachers to advocate for themselves and changes they want to see at their schools. Again, we have to make teachers feel comfortable in their own workplace. We shouldn't make them feel forced to do anything. The only thing they should be forced to do is ensure that each student learns. They should be able to be flexible and using whatever skills and tactics they think is good enough to ensure that each student is catered to and each student has what they need in order to be successful. We are recommending the creation of a mentoring program for highly effective workers to help those rated ineffective to improve instead of just removing them from schools. This was my idea. Oftentimes you find people, for example, like first-year teachers who are rated ineffective, and when they say ineffective, they aren't good enough to teach. In my opinion, we should have the people who are rated highly effective to help those people out, to just be a mentor. Just like students can have mentors, adults need help too, although sometimes you guys don't want to admit it. But just creating a program like this can help those teachers to feel comfortable and ensure that they're getting the help they need in order to stay in those schools. We are recommending that before teachers and staff members come to work at each school, especially first-year teachers, that we give them an opportunity to get a glimpse of the school's climate by teaching something like a sample lesson or just doing something simple like having lunch with the students. If you're coming to a school, for example, like Ballou, I can only speak of that because I've gone there for 4 years and I've grown up there. If you're going to a school like that, you can't just come there and expect to come there every day. Hello, sweetheart. Nice to meet you. We're going to get to work. Students don't just leave their baggage at the door. Some students experience trauma and things of that sort. So each person coming into each building should know what they need to expect. Yes, acknowledge what they're going through, and it shouldn't be a surprise. If you have more fights at certain schools, that shouldn't be a surprise to you as a new first-year teacher, because you should already know that before you come in. Lastly, we want to ensure that opportunities such as dual enrollment are available to all students who have fulfilled their necessary requirements and need exposure in a life beyond high school. When we say this is going back to that equity piece. We want to just ensure that every student feel comfortable, whether they want to go into college or career. We just need to provide those resources and leave them there for each student to get that glimpse into what the future will look like. Thank you.
Lastly, in concluding, what will be fixed, what will be improved? So what will be fixed is students being more comfortable in the school environment. Coming into the school environment knowing that, they're going to be treated the same across wherever they are. If they're in Ward 1 compared to Ward 8, that both of them will receive the same opportunities no matter where they are and where they're located. As well, just, with these improvements, the school's academic goals will be met or they will improve, because of all these tactics being put into place and being enforced within the school community will just improve just like the school's academic rates and be more accessible to, other people wanting to come into these schools and, students applying to colleges and everything, see how good their school is no matter where they're located or what opportunity is being given to them. Also, parent involvement will increase, just seeing more of, parent faces, students with their parents at these meetings, students from no matter what background, expressing what they want their child to be given or what should be improved in the school setting or what they can do to improve all this, no matter if they have a high school degree or if they don't have a high school degree. A high school diploma or they don't have a high school diploma, if they have a college degree or if they don't. Just allowing each parent to give their input and not be judged no matter what. Also, just the funding and the budgeting for schools will improve or will increase or will just be used more. I guess the budgeting will be more organized and will be used towards things that will improve the student and the teachers. Lastly, okay.
And then for what will be fixed with teacher retention, once we lower this rate, we will see that the staff will stay longer, of course, because the rates are being lowered. We will see the pool for teacher selections increase. And when we say this, I can give you an example. In 10th grade, I didn't have a math teacher because they just said it wasn't enough teachers in the pool that were willing to come to work at our school. When we start satisfying teachers, more teachers will become available and we won't have as many long-term substitutes. And lastly, we are putting the needs of the students first. Oftentimes when adults come to work in school, sometimes, I hate to say it, but it's for a paycheck. We need to ensure that every worker that comes to work with a student, it just has their students at heart at the end of the day. Yes, and they're genuine. Thank you, we're done. Sorry.
Thank you. Any questions? That was over 3 minutes. Sorry.
Thank you. That was terrific. So we're going to have a round of questions from members, and John Paul will call people and time them.
Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all and commend you in particular on your civic engagement. We're only as good as our government, and you're actively participating in your government, and I can't say enough good things about that. I hope you keep it up throughout your lifetimes. It's incredibly important. One of the recommendations, Representative Robinson, that I think you missed, but I think is really important, is a recommendation that schools with lower test scores get a PARK test prep or SAT and ACT prep classes. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Sorry about that. We were trying to hurry.
I got your back.
But with that, basically, like Marjorie said, it's hard to get into college when you don't have good test scores, or it's hard to even prove yourself or your school be frowned upon because your test scores are lower. But in order for us test scores to be increased, we have to give every school, again, not what they want, but what they need to be successful. If a certain school only needs, let's say, 1 hour SAT prep every 2 days for their students to be successful, but another school needs SAT prep, and not just SAT prep, but real world prep, financial literacy. If they need things like that every day, then that should be included on the school's everyday schedule. So again, catering to each school's needs and just ensuring that you're looking at not only the ward and their environment, but just the school's history and how successful they are in each category. Then you'll find that you need more SAT prep here, while you need more financial literacy here, things of that sort.
Thank you. And this is for all four of you. I think it goes a little bit with equity because we want to make sure that each school has facilities that it needs. Are our graduation requirements appropriate given the large difference in equity and resources across our schools?
Wait.
Yes.
I mean,
I think if I answer you,
yeah.
So honestly, I think it is, and because some schools lack things, you can't lower those expectations for them, because when they get to the real world, expectations aren't going to be lower for them. So again, we need to give those schools what they need, but I think that the graduation requirements are solid. And honestly, I say that because some people think that you shouldn't have to have 2 consecutive years of one language, for example, but you should be able to do maybe 1 French and 1 Spanish. You aren't going to be proficient enough to go into the real world and speak Spanish if you only had 1 year of it. You need at least 2 years. Or some people argue that there shouldn't be an upper level math course. I think it's important to know math. So just simple things like, some people argue that you shouldn't have to have that much community service. If you aren't being, at the end of the day, everyone's goal should be ensuring that we are creating citizens for our communities to ensure that they're safe and things of that sort. So if they aren't doing community service and saying what it's like to give to the community, how are we ensuring that?
Thank you. The representative's time has expired. Dr. O'Leary.
Ladies, you are experts on education. I'm wondering, now that you're going out into the next step of your lives, if teaching is a vocation that you'd like to pursue because you're very knowledgeable about it.
No thanks. We're trying to save time.
No, that's all right.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Dr. Sutter.
I was looking for something for one of my colleagues. Thank you very much for your testimony and for this report. I think it's incredibly thoughtful. I wanted to ask a question because one thing I've noticed in my time so far on the board is that the most profound feedback I've heard on our education system has come from students. You are the most experienced, the most immersed in it, so that makes sense. But I've just been deeply impressed and want to hear from you on this question. So last night at the same parent meeting I talked about, there was discussion about how to resolve this notion of inequitable access to courses at different schools. And the parents were pointing out that at Eastern, there's only 1 foreign language offered. It's an IB program, but there's only Spanish language offered, whereas Wilson High School offers 5. So how do we think about practically resolving those inequities in things like access to the number of languages offered or access to the number of AP courses offered? Do we simply offer more and hire extra teachers? If so, how do we deal with that? Do we think about sharing courses across schools? I'd be curious to hear what you may think about how we practically try and start to solve those problems.
So that's so people in my school, they always talk about that as well. My school, they just offer Spanish, which is, a very common language within, any job fairs. Spanish is like the main one people always know. But like you said, it all kind of comes down to budgeting. If these schools have enough budget, have enough resources to actually offer all these languages and good quality as well, because if they offer it, what if they have a really bad teacher? What if the teacher's not qualified and it's just money being wasted and students just wasting their time as well because it's not being used properly. Where some students have to take it at other schools, they have to commute, on top of whatever schoolwork they have, on top of whatever responsibility that they have, and because of that, it's kind of like a domino effect. It affects other things as well. Sorry if I'm talking with my hands a lot. And so I definitely do think that language opportunity should be offered across all schools, but the main focus that should be in order to allow access to all this is the budgeting. So first we have to target the budgeting and then, make these changes and then the qualifications.
In my opinion, I think that we need to do a comparison in terms of the data. Oftentimes people say these schools don't need this because they have this. If you compare a school like Wilson, who has the 5 foreign languages, and you see that in the future those students become successful because of having courses like that, or if they have 30 AP courses and those students didn't have to take the prerequisites in college and it saved them money because of having those courses available in high school, then it should, not only DCPS, but the charter school board should create a plan to implement those courses if it is shown to have improvements and to benefit the students.
Thank you. The representative's time has expired. Ms. MacLeay.
Tatiana, Marjorie, ladies, thank you very much for being here tonight and presenting to us your findings. As I read through the final report, you guys spent a wealth of time this year really digging into the issues. And it really looks like you did a ton of work, and I really appreciate that. With the two large topics of both teacher retention and equity, I noticed that there was an overarching principal leadership and retention. Both that goes into both of those issues. I was wondering, with a principal, that principal often sets the culture and tone of a school. And looking into several of the areas and issues that you talked about today, opportunities, teacher turnover, equity, parental involvement, PTA involvement, did you look at principal retention and or principal mentorship programs at all in your findings at all? And if so, do you have any recommendations, or did you just look at teachers specifically?
Again, we only have from September to now. So we chose to focus on teacher retention because it's such a broad spectrum. But we did spend a couple meetings talking about principal retention. And one thing that we found, and the reason that we chose to focus on teacher retention is because now more than ever, some reasons that the teachers are, leaving and going to different schools or not teaching anymore is because they don't feel that support from the principal, or they don't agree with the way the principal is running the school or things of that sort. And again, with the mentoring program, you can add this to the recommendation because this was discussed at our meetings. We recommended that it also be available to, so it will be a highly effective teacher category, ineffective teacher category, and then administrative category, where basically administrators who have been in the game for a long time and have consistently made change at their school that was positive, they help those new principals and other administrators to just improve, ensure that they are successful. And what we discussed was it's not just about being ineffective, but also just ensuring that you have a colleague that's there to support you to ensure that you're comfortable, even if you are rated effective but not highly effective, you just have that support there. So we did discuss that.
Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you all very much. So where do I start? Okay, so I guess following up on Dr. Stutter's question about access and what impacts access. So of course, funding is one piece of the puzzle, right? I'm just curious to know if there are other things that you have found to impact whether or not students have access to, a well-rounded education. For instance, one thing I'm wondering if there's a tension between you recommend, schools with lower test scores get more test prep. Is there a tension there, where schools with students who tend to score less or lower have less electives or opportunities? And are there other issues that you think impact that?
I think those issues are the main ones that really do, like I said, it creates a domino effect. So because, school having low performance, low SAT scores, all that, it kind of like restricts them from getting other opportunities or receiving other opportunities because, a lot of things or a lot of places, they look at test scores. That's what kind of determines, like Tatiana said before, it kind of determines if you get this or you get that, if you get this opportunity, if you don't. So that's kind of like that's really one big barrier as well, which funding also, comes within that. But I guess those are the main ones that we found during our research. I don't know if some other people in my group want to speak if they found something else, but those are the ones that we all found in general.
I thought for our time, our two topics were very overarching in some scopes, and so effects of school inequity can be teacher retention and keeping teachers, because when we don't have enough teachers, then we cut back on electives, because I personally, at my old school, because I was in Colorado, I took American Sign Language, but because we did not have enough teachers in social studies and other curriculums, we had to cut back on some electives, such as like Middle Eastern Studies and American Sign Language. So classes like those aren't taught when we don't have enough teachers to cover the bare minimum.
Right. So it's sort of a vicious cycle. Yeah. A domino effect. I have 24 seconds. So, Tatiana, what supports do you think teachers most need to keep them in their schools?
Not only, again, do I think that they need to get a glimpse of each school's culture before they work there to ensure that it is what they expect, but I just think that honestly they just need support from each other, because oftentimes teachers divide themselves from being a good teacher to just being a teacher who is there. And so I think that just providing a program to where teachers are kind of like fellow teachers to each other can help a teacher's just day to be better by just a simple hello.
Thank you.
Thank you. The representative's time has expired. Do you need?
Yeah. Sorry guys, I have to go. I have another obligation. Sorry about that, but it's for a scholarship program that I've been involved.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Ms. Williams.
And thank you so much, Tatiana, for everything.
Well, since she did the teacher retention, I might have to change my question, but during your investigation, did you see a difference between the teacher retention rates in the DC public school system versus the public charter school system, or were they kind of even and for the same reasons, or did you even be able to dive into that?
We kind of did touch upon that, but from what I saw is that teacher retention was definitely at a higher rate in DC public school, DC public schools compared to DC public charter schools, and which vary in reasons on why the public schools there's a higher rate than in the public schools. So that's what I found, and that's what we kind of touched upon, but not so specifically. We kind of touched more upon on the public schools in DC.
Although it varied, we did see the issue in both categories, especially speaking as I went to both a public and a charter school here in the DC area. Charter schools also experience teacher turnover, mainly because most of our charter schools are new, and finding the right balance of teachers in those charter schools can be difficult sometimes.
Any other comment? That was really, because since we are looking at teacher retention and strengthening the teacher workforce, that's kind of where my focus is right now. So do you have any recommendations of how we can increase the strength of the teacher workforce?
Can you say that question a little bit louder?
Okay, so how can we strengthen our teacher workforce? What do you think teachers need to stay in the system and to grow in the system?
I think most definitely just being able to, like schools being able to, just kind of integrate and, be able to take any new teachers, provide training for them, provide, all these resources for them to be able to feel comfortable, as, Tatiana mentioned as well during when she spoke, just being able for them to feel comfortable and just kind of allowing their voice to be heard during their work, during their job, because a lot of people, some teachers, they feel like, they can't really say a say on what they should teach and what they shouldn't, and which leads them to go to other schools who do give them the opportunity, and which brings a lot of schools to lose teachers at a higher rate and everything, and just provide the principals or people on their board to, hear what the teachers have to bring to the table instead of just disregarding what they're saying, and just stick to the rules and just stick to what they think is best.
To piggyback off of what Marjorie said, I think one thing we've heard, or quite a few things we've heard over and over again today, is comfort, support, and administration, not in a positive light. And teachers just seem to feel not comfortable in their positions. And I feel like one practical way we can address this, I know the parent-teacher meetings, every time teachers mention them in passing, it always seems like a chore, like something they begrudgingly drag themselves to because they have to. So I don't know what goes on in the meetings, but teachers don't seem to like them very much. And I'm sure there are many other things like those meetings that teachers don't seem to like very much about their roles, and they bring that same "I don't like this" attitude into the classroom, which the students are impacted by as well. So I feel like just reorganizing things like that to teacher liking.
I think it's also understanding that we may not have a strong pool, but it's creating the best that we can from the pool that we have. Because although we might not have the biggest, we have to cultivate great teachers, and so that we understand that although that teacher might not be great from day one, they can be a great teacher in day 20 to day 100.
The representative's time has expired. Mr. Parker.
Thank you all for your testimony and the work that you put in this year. I often say the most important voice in this work is from our students, and so again, thank you for that. The recommendations that you mentioned regarding mentorship and teacher-student onboarding processes and dual enrollment are all very insightful, and I do plan to share these recommendations with community and parent volunteers in Ward 5 just to see how we can support and follow up on those recommendations. I do have a number of questions. One, Marjorie, you did mention in your testimony lack of training for teachers. If you can expound on what areas of training
they need to focus on?
You need to focus on, and who would that training be administered by? Would that be through that peer teacher mentorship, or would that be from school and/or district officials?
I think definitely the training that should be focused on is how teachers tend to the students, because like how Tatiana mentioned before, a lot of students, when they come into school, they have all this emotional distress from home or other things outside of the school community. So when they do come into the school, some students feel that like the school is like a safe place. So teachers being able to accommodate them or kind of guiding them through other resources on how to accommodate them is something very important, as well as just how to be able to handle certain situations in schools. That's something important, which could be, if there's like a fight, or if there's just like, some sort of challenge with kind of like the teaching requirements within the school. So being able to be trained on that. Also just also being able to just learn on how like the school curriculum is, where some schools, like for example DCI, they really base off their learning off of computers and everything. So being able to to learn how to accommodate that sort of focus in that school, along with other ways that students should be learning and being taught from. I believe that kind of this sort of training should be done maybe by which it could vary from the school, from the district, or just from other organizations where they target this sort of training for the schools, and also like the mentoring, accessibility and training programs as well.
Awesome, thank you for that. Two other quick questions. One, dual enrollment in your current schools. Are there any opportunities for dual enrollment programs?
In my school there is, but I think it varies, where some students can get a scholarship and they can. And some if they do get the scholarship, then some students do, but if there's like no funding or something, then some students don't pursue it. But there is the opportunity in my school. I'm not sure how it is for other schools, but my school does have it.
Thank you. The representative's time has expired, sorry. Mr. Batchelor.
Thank you all for your service. I have one question for Marjorie, and then I have a question for all of you. In terms of your work around parent engagement, and you talked personally kind of about some of the challenges that your mom had in terms of engaging with your school community, what would make engagement easier for parents like yours, whether it's a language barrier or just time restriction? What would make school level engagement with parents easier?
I guess just promoting that sort of engagement to the parents and to any sort of family, because if parents don't know that, you know, there's like this sort of translator that will be there, or if there's like some sort of way where the parents can actually understand and everything, then without it being promoted or being shared to the students and everything, then like the parents will know. And I actually had this conversation with Serena. She actually was trying to focus on research on how, you know, any sort of like bilingual sort of opportunities within like the state board should be access to families from different backgrounds and everything, and which is important because a lot of those families, they do have a lot to say, but they don't know how to say or how to express it, which is, you know, something very powerful that some of them have to say. And, you know, it would be amazing to hear in these opportunities, but there's no way that, you know, they could be able to, or people, you know, being able to take it in, then it's kind of just gone down the drain. But yeah, that's sort of one recommendation that I have.
Yeah, so I heard translation services. I heard a little bit about multilingual materials. Is there anything else top of mind you can think of?
I guess just promoting how kind of like the state board can access these sort of barriers to like the families. Because I didn't know that, you know, they did until I talked to Serena. So, you know, some families won't even know that, and, you know, they don't even understand. They probably won't even know what the state board actually does, but, you know, having the schools promote what the state board does, can improve the involvement of the families within the state board and in the school.
To answer as well, yeah. I feel like just emphasizing that these types of meetings and parent involvement and where it is a safe space. Speaking as an immigrant myself, my mom and I migrated here. I migrated 2 years ago. 3 years ago, she migrated about 5. Every time the school calls, she's always kind of like, I wouldn't say scared, but she worries that like it's something related to her immigration status, or like there's something going on that's like amiss. So I would just emphasizing that these meetings are a safe space, and I'm a part of a club, Estudiante tu Estudiante, which helps students who are from bilingual families or who've recently migrated like myself to kind of bridge the gap and transition to America, to Wilson, to wherever they are. And I feel like one thing we focus on is just emphasizing that it's a safe space and that their parents can contribute regardless of their immigration status or their legal status or whatever it is.
Thank you. President Wattenberg.
Thanks again for all of us. One thing we will do is send the recommendations in addition to the board, sort of resend them to all the people on the Teacher Retention Committee to specifically look at the retention recommendations and the issue about the inequity to all of our working groups, so that it's sort of front and center. So thank you very much. My question is really, you talked about the importance of sort of working with teachers where they are, so maybe they start as not so effective, and then you want them to be provided with the support so that they can become effective. And I'm curious you all, I don't know how much you're aware of this teacher was ranked this way or this way. If you have a sense of that, I'm just curious about your own personal sense that someone who maybe got a poor rating, that you really do believe that they can be grow into something, into a very effective teacher. That's sort of what I'm hearing, and I'm wondering if you have like specific examples of it, if that's sort of how you feel when you talk to individual teachers.
From what I can say, in my old high school, I had a teacher. It was his first year. He was a math teacher, and most of the students, they got to see that, you know, he had great potential. But, you know, being like a first year teacher, sometimes very hard for teachers to even get comfortable with the students, and then get comfortable with learning what sort of teaching methods can help the students. But then some students aren't aware of that. Some students don't understand that. So that's why some students wouldn't be open to any of these new teaching styles, and which would, you know, lead them to being a little rude to the teacher in like very unnecessary ways. So just being able to, you know, have teachers like learn how to like accommodate that when it happens in a way where, you know, they don't sound rude, and they're actually just helping the student out, and just like kind of overlooking that sort of vibe that like the student might give, and just being able to them to, you know, just provide like the sense of help and, you know, a safe space where the student, you know, can kind of leave the attitude outside of school, and then, be open to all these, like, teaching styles. So that's something very important as well. And the teacher, towards the end of the year, like, what can I say? He's, like, one of, like, the best math teachers like I've ever experienced, and I really hope that he can progress in teaching other sort of math to other students, because I still learn how to do geometry.
Thank you. Quick, either of you want to respond?
I don't know what the question was.
If you when you had like a teacher
I'll start while she goes. We had a new teacher at Wilson. I didn't know her personally when she started here, but from students it was a little rough because she came from teaching a few honors biology classes to now, after 4 years, teaching most of our AP biology and our AP environmental science classes, to even winning an outstanding teacher award this year. So it's the progress from starting from day one to like building and like leaning on your other teachers to develop as a person. Yeah.
You don't have to. Oh, he's gonna.
Do you want to
I was just gonna say, like, I know the teacher she's speaking of, and I can honestly say I will probably remember her name when I'm done with college, probably retired, because she made such an impact on my life. She was like one of my first teachers in DC, and I remember her. And I'm just saying, like, teachers like her should have the opportunity to mentor other teachers, because I've known of teachers who've been there for 20 years plus and don't do half the job that she does. So just the mentoring program, and also training, because she cites training for her like intuitive lesson plans. So.
That's really cool. Thank you all very much. You all have really, really been a terrific, terrific group. Thank you so much.
You guys too.
Maybe you'll come and mentor our next group. We very much appreciate you being here. For those members of the Student Advisory Committee that are completing their senior year, please know that you take with you the thanks and appreciation of the State Board. For those that are continuing in high school next year, we look forward to seeing you in September for the next Student Advisory Committee. And I also want to acknowledge our incoming student representatives. I believe Deja had to go, but Alexandra O'Sullivan is here, and we look forward to having you. All right, so I need Marjorie back up here so that she can move to accept the advisory committee report. Thank you guys so much.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. The motion having been properly moved and seconded, I call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, the ayes have it, and the report is accepted. Thank you again. The ESSA task force. This has been a long meeting, and we are really looking forward to this report. 2 years in coming. Since August 2017, the ESSA task force has met more than 20 times with the purpose of helping the State Board consider issues related to the Every Student Succeeds Act. The State Board set up the task force to represent a diverse array of community stakeholders and education leaders from all 8 wards of the city, following the precedent set by our high school graduation requirements task force. The task force has served as a forum for residents and representatives of constituent groups to discuss the development and deployment of the DC school report card. Tonight, the State Board will hear from 3 of the members of the task force about the recommendations contained in the task force report. So would the members of the task force please, who are here tonight, come to the front, and would those presenting come to the table? As the members come forward, I want to personally thank Dr. Lynette Woodruff, the first chair of the task force, and Karen Williams, who has chaired it since Lynette's departure last fall. Thank both of them for their leadership of the task force over the past 2 years. Their work led to important information being included on the city's newly launched school report cards. Thank you all for being here tonight. You each will have 5 minutes to discuss a part of the report, and you may begin when you're ready. We'll start on the right.
Okay, hi, my name is Sheila Strang-Clark. I am a resident of Ward 5 and a parent of 2 DC Public School children who attend Capitol Hill Montessori at Logan. And I was a member of the Academic Equity Committee, which was a committee comprised of several ESSA task force members, inclusive of representatives from public schools, charter schools, UDC, parents, and community service providers. Our task was to look at what recommendations we could make to this committee to improve academic equity, and so we prepared a testimony or a report that I'll read to you. So the Academic Equity Committee acknowledges the progress our city public schools have made in improving outcomes for low-income and minority students across the city over the last 2 decades. However, there continues to be an achievement gap between our low-income students and students of color compared to their more affluent peers across the District of Columbia and the country. On the National Assessment of Educational Progress Trial Urban District Assessment, Black District of Columbia Public School 4th graders improved proficiency rates to 18% in math in 2017. Nationally, white students achieved at 51% on average. In 8th grade, the District of Columbia's black students in 2017 were just 9% proficient in math, compared to 72% of their white peers in DCPS. On the district's Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, or PARC assessment, 2018 results showed that in English, 82% of white students were proficient, compared with 25% of black students and 32% of Hispanic students. In math, 79% of white students were proficient on the PARC, compared with just 21% of black students and 28% of Hispanic students. At-risk students were just 18% proficient on average, while their more affluent peers were 44% proficient. So there's huge gaps, and the numbers are pretty stark, and we have a table in this document that talks about it. And I think because the disparity is so severe, we really struggled as a committee to try to come up with some recommendations that would be meaningful, because we understand that this issue is compiled by poverty, racism, economic disparity, generational issues. So it wasn't any type of situation that we could come up with a magic pill that was going to solve this problem. But we did continue to move forward with our task at hand, even though we did struggle. We felt impaired by limited research and data available in district schools, so our initial ideas for recommendations centered around city leadership striving to better understand the challenges facing the lowest performing schools, specifically all schools earning a 1 or 2 star rating, and especially the 10 schools designated Comprehensive Support 1 by OSSE. Given the ongoing progress related to the committee's primary concerns, we offer the following thoughts on possible next steps. Support additional targeted research to ensure equitable outcomes. Ultimately, committee members believe the combination of comprehensive research conducted by the new DC Educational Research Practice Partnership and smaller networks of schools focused on utilizing improvement science to solve unique student challenges can illuminate best practices most likely to bend the student achievement curve upward. Please accept the committee's members' recommendations for key research questions. So in the letter itself, there's several questions that we suggest that be considered for exploration. I think the other thing, just to point out, you heard the students talking about mentors. In the teacher capacity, we heard College Bound was here today, and they were talking about mentorship, but we really believe that there's an opportunity for mentorship school to school. There are some schools that have begun to figure this out, particularly the bold performance schools that have been highlighted by some of our community-based partners. So there's schools that have started to close the gap, and we need to use those schools as leaders in the process to help other schools figure it out. We also recognize that there's limited funding available to improve comprehensive support schools. So the committee felt that it was important that city leaders recognize that the $11 million in OSSE grants for the 10 comprehensive support schools over the next 3 years is insufficient to address the challenges that these schools face, especially given that our city has yet to commit to adequately funding the base per pupil and at-risk student funding formulas for all schools. We encourage the council to memorialize via legislation a plan to adequately fund schools within the next 3 years. So just understanding that there was this research conducted what the necessary base per pupil cost was and at-risk student funding costs were, or the need, but then we don't fund our schools at that level, then what are we doing, right? So that needs to be recalibrated, but once it's recalibrated, I think that's in the plan coming up or something, that once we figured it out, let's create legislation to put it in place with the actual pathway to get it there. And then we need to develop, or our recommendation is that a comprehensive citywide equity action plan needs to be developed, and it needs to be done at the level of the mayor's office or deputy mayor for education. We know OSSI has a plan, but it really needs to be elevated to a district level plan. And this equity action plan would include analysis of all educational inputs, outcomes to reduce gaps in academic rigor, growth, and achievement between different student groups. The plan should include high leverage research questions and macro level ideas for sharing information and maximizing existing resources for the benefit of all schools and students. The plan should also include funding opportunities for community-based organizations that work with our schools to better address children and families' needs. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the report from the Academic Equity Committee.
I guess it's my turn. My name is Jacques Patterson. I am a proud resident of Ward 8. I have 2 children that attend DCPS schools, and then I also have a daughter that teaches at a charter school. I had the great opportunity to be part of the Leading for Equity Committee, and I'm very grateful to be on that particular committee, being a resident of east of the river and where many of the inequities were. I'll just read to you basically what our statements were, because I think they really captured a lot of the concerns that we had, and the group worked very hard on them. So I wanted to make sure you heard them verbatim, and then I'm sure I'll be able to answer some of your questions. But the Leading for Equity Committee focused its work on school leadership, the challenges and the opportunities faced by educators and school administrators, and how the Every Student Succeed Act and its accountability provisions affect school climate on the ground. The committee believes that effective instructional leadership is a key driver necessary to achieve equitable learning opportunities across all schools. The goal of our committee's recommendations is to provide the following ideals for further exploration by district of education agencies. So our first one was offer additional support to lower rated schools not already eligible for support. Schools scoring in the bottom 5% of all schools on the STAR framework, as well as high schools with graduation rates below 67%, are designated as comprehensive support, comprehensive support. And any school with 1 or more student subgroups performing below comprehensive support threshold is eligible for targeted support. However, this represents a relatively small fraction of district schools, just 23 schools in 2018. We recommend district leadership explore options to provide support to administrators and teachers in the 51 schools that were rated 1 or 2 stars on the STAR framework but are not eligible for support services or funds. Secondly, promote partnerships with external organizations to build capacity and enhance the capabilities of school leadership. The committee discussed a model where organizations in the District of Columbia partner with schools to increase the capacity and skills of school leadership. Committee members suggested the district leaders identify funding sources to expand school partnerships that complement LEA activities focused on increasing school leadership capacity. Thirdly, support rigorous research that identifies cost-effective policies and programs. Committee members felt that there is little quality guidance for schools that link financial decisions and programs and policies, and promote equitable learning opportunities. Research practice partnerships can offer technical assistance to LEAs in schools on creative use of funding. And last, provide additional targeted technical assistance to LEAs in schools regarding creative use of at-risk and other federal resources. The goal of this technical assistance should be to increase the impact of school at-risk funds. Thank you.
All right, so Laura Fuchs, a resident of Ward 5, and I teach in Ward 7. And I was on the School Resources and Funding Equity Committee, surprise, surprise, since budgets are my thing. So I think kind of underlying what the other committees said, really money is one of the major issues that we have to look at that's kind of underlying some of the struggles that schools have. And so we, as a committee, we had representatives from PAVE, teachers, board members, community members. It's a pretty diverse group. We really kind of got overzealous at the beginning. We just listed everything we wanted to know about budgets, and we had a really, really, really long list of just all the things that parents, community members, teachers, like just what we'd want to know about our schools. Kind of consolidated that list in the appendix, that's Appendix B on the report, and I'll go over a few of them. But basically, kind of our overall concept was that the report card's an opportunity to provide information that is kind of standardized between all the LEAs of at least some kind of basic level of information, which can then potentially be used to inform which schools are being innovative and which schools, if you see high test scores at a school that is a bold performance school or whatever we want to look at, then we can look at some of their financials, and while we might not have the full thing, we'd at least get to see some things, and maybe we'd see if there are patterns, and we'd see if there are things that schools are doing that are successful. But that kind of comes down to all the LEAs agreeing at least on some level to some standardization of how they report their spending. And this can be between kind of their central office costs versus local school costs. This can be kind of how much they're spending on teachers, how much they're spending on supplies. Let me pull up our list here. How they're spending their at-risk funding, how much they're spending on special education, English language learners, professional development, extracurricular programs, et cetera. Like there's, Appendix B's got a kind of just a generalized bullet point of some of the things that came up in our discussion. It's not meant to necessarily be prescriptive in terms of our recommendation, but it is like whichever ones kind of get agreed to is like schools are already reporting this somewhere, so it wouldn't be an overdue burden to the schools to go ahead and report this information and for us to collect it and put it in one place where we can begin to start looking at some of that data. Because right now, we know on 26th there's discussion on a bill about budget transparency. Budget transparency is an issue both inside DCPS and inside our charter LEAs for a lot of people. Then, sorry, I scrolled to the wrong spot. All right, so we have the standardization, and then, kind of as I said, the goal would be to then identify some of the high leverage budget items that are tied to equitable outcomes. So hopefully we would start to see some patterns of schools that are being innovative with their spending and are finding things that work. And then other LEAs could then learn from those practices. And frankly, we were in a place with the people on our committee where we really, the committee at least, felt that, more information is better. That parents have a right to know how their school is spending their money, that people who work in the schools have a right to know how their school is spending the money, and that if more people know, then they can provide feedback. So that being said, when we reported out to the whole group, not everyone wholly maybe agreed with our long list of things that we wanted to have reported on. And since they weren't on our committee, they didn't really get as much of a chance to give feedback. So we do just kind of have mentioned in the report that there were some task force members who were maybe concerned about kind of how much of a burden this might be on schools, depending, especially I think one of the concerns is about PTOs and PTAs and how that can affect equity. We heard it with the students before, we've heard it before here and elsewhere in the city, and I think we kind of included it in our long list, at least our original long list. So we do know that that might be a trickier one to get at, because not all PTOs file 990s, and there's all sorts of different organizations. They might call themselves something else, and they're kind of friends of, or maybe they're friends of the ward, and they're given all over the place. Like it obviously is complicated, but if our goal is to try to figure out, and then there's also the issue of like private donations and grants, and some schools do a lot of those, and maybe that would be a big reporting burden. Though I assume they have to report them somewhere at some point because they're receiving money and they're using it in a school. So there are some, questions that would still need to be worked out as to how this would work.
Thank you very much. We will have a round of questions. Members have 3 minutes around, and I will turn it again over to Mr. Hayworth.
Mr. Jacobson.
Having been a member of the task force and participated in a lot of these discussions, I don't really have any questions. I do want to thank you all for your service on the committee or on the task force. It's really invaluable, and maybe offline, if there are suggestions on how the board can conduct its task forces better, ways we could make improvements to make sure that we're using your time as valuably as we can. We know your time is precious, particularly when you have families and friends that you'd like to spend time with. We appreciate your input and your service, and we'll take your recommendations incredibly seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. O'Leary.
I want to second the motion that Mr. Jacobson said about your time spent on this very important process. It's interesting that the process that the students talked about and what y'all talked about is very similar. And it seems to me that we're talking about a sea change in what needs to be done in order for our education system to get better. Did you find any difference in what was going on with the charter schools and what was going on with the public schools as far as what y'all were looking for?
I think Dr. O'Leary, I don't know if this is it on. I think Dr. O'Leary, there is always a difference between different charter schools who are big networks. I work for KIPP, and what we can do as opposed to a smaller LEA is obviously much different, and the resources that we can bring to bear is a lot different. And the same thing as with some of our DCPS schools. I had the opportunity to be in an EML class at Georgetown with a lot of the principals that are in Ward 8 at the current time, at Turner, at Henley, and a few other schools. And I can say categorically, we had resources at our disposal that they didn't have that they would love to have, as far as when we start talking about things like violent interrupters or things. As you know, we recently lost a child that went to Somerset. Previous to that, last year, KIPP lost a child that was at the Noma station. But we were able to add resources and things like that that probably are not accessible to other schools, that changed the kind of equity that was there and allowed teachers and principals and school leaders to focus more on what was happening inside the building, while a group like my own at KIPP, where I could focus exclusively on outside activities. And that would let Laura, really focus on what her kids needed and then transmit that information to me. And I could talk to parents, I could talk to people outside the school. Those are some of the inequities that happen, and you have to look at how are schools funded and how they use their funds and where they can support those school leaders so they can have that type of culture. And we got very much into that aspect of where those inequities lie, not just, in different wards, but also between charters and between DCPS schools.
And just really briefly, I think a lot of actually the tension is more like kind of internal DCPS has issues that charters don't have to face, because we do have our central office and we have that relationship between local schools. So at least with budgeting, our issues are also just that our schools don't always have full transparency on whether we're getting the right amount of funds, which I think is less of an issue on the charter side because it's kind of a straight formula, like number of kids, these are the two buckets, go to charter. Within a charter LEA, I don't know. But because DCPS is so large and represents, over half of these students, we do have kind of a unique set of challenges that came up. But I don't know that it was a difference in need or just a difference of circumstance, at least for our committee.
Thank you. The representative's time has expired. Dr. Sutter.
Should I now? Okay. And I was going to say, we didn't talk about it so much on our committee, but I do think special education is a place that should be explored when you're talking about the difference between public and charter. I think I see that playing out a lot on a day-to-day basis, and that, of course, ties right into academic equity, because we know a lot of the young people that are not performing well in school are young people that also are highly impacted by having disabilities, which are highly correlated with the special education population. And for some of the smaller LEAs, I think there is an equity issue in terms of being able to take care of the needs of our special education students.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sutter.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll echo my colleagues on thank you for spending the time over 2 years to participate in this. I know it was not a small lift, but I think that the interplay of having teachers, parents, folks who work for different LEAs, folks with different professional experiences, bringing all that to the table is why we ended up with such a thorough and thoughtful report. One question I have that sort of stems both from your report, but also from a number of things that are happening in the city right now, is that in looking at recommendations like this, the devil's always in the details of implementation. So as we think about getting things implemented, whether it's budget reporting or it's aspects of data that we haven't collected before that we have to collect now, how do we deal with checking on the process and progress of implementation? And then I'll add a bias here. How do we do it in a way that focuses on continuous improvement of that implementation rather than you did it right or heads will roll? Because I think that is not a great way for us to treat anybody, students, adults. How do we deal with implementation and keeping that continuous improvement mindset?
I mean, I guess, part of it is, going to come down to OSSI and kind of what they're able to ask for. And I guess the question of, do we ask for things kind of gradually? Do we start with lowest hanging fruit? Like, what already is in OSSI's possession in terms of you had to report this, so here we already got it. Can we then transfer it over to this report card setting where people could more easily see it in that one location, and then maybe scaling up from there? But it could also, maybe it is that, as much as everyone wants another task force, but somebody maybe needs to meet with a couple of the LEAs, and I'd frankly say not just the top level officials, since it's often who we focus on, but to try to get the people who'd have to do it, right? Ask them, kind of the way that we've shopped around the report card to parents who are the ones who have to use it primarily. Can we get the people who have to put the information in, get their feedback, and see what information do they feel yep, I could do that right now, not a problem, versus oh my goodness, what? I don't know about that. I need 2 more years to figure out how we can get that system going before we have to do that. I don't know.
Probably also just being realistic about how long it's going to take to get things done. I think that's, you're going to, of course, have QA in any implementation process. But just understanding, just even listening to the data, if we have a 50% gap in proficiency rates, it's going to take a long time to get that where we want it to be. So I just, I would say just with any implementation, you're going to have gradual milestones, having a long enough rampway, and building in checks and balances along the way.
Thank you.
Ms. MacLeay.
Thank you very much for being here this evening and for sitting through. We're in hour 3 now of our meeting, and I appreciate it. But then again, you guys have been here for the past 2 years, and so it's another 3 hours. No, I sincerely appreciate it. I was on the selection committee for this task force, so when we looked through the applications and we really pieced through and dug through the people who we wanted to be a part of this task force, we want you to know that we really wanted each of you for the background, the advice, and where you are in the city, the fact that you have family, the fact that you're a teacher, the fact that you're union members, the fact that you are parents and educators really made a difference in all of this. Looking over the report, obviously, we've been updated over several times over the past 2 years, so I don't have too many questions. I just wanted to say, very quickly comment, thank you very much for when you talk about standardizing information on the report card, that you talked about not just the amount of information that we want on the report card, but also the burdens and challenges that come with it across all of the different types of recommendations that you put forth tonight. And that doing so may present problems in potentially providing with some schools opportunities and innovation. I also want to appreciate your last comment that it is going to take time to implement these and really make sure that we are giving our parents and our community members the right info for the time being, and that this will be an ever-evolving report card. So thank you again for all of your work, and we will reach out if we do have any questions in the future.
Thank you. Dr. Gasoi.
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to actually comment on the equity statement that you drafted and to thank you for that. I think it's excellent and should really guide all of our work. And so I just think it's very valuable, and thank you.
Ms. Williams.
What can I say? It's been a pleasure. No, it's been a pleasure working with you, because I've been with you since the beginning. Unfortunately, when Dr. Woodward left, I had to take over as chair, which was kind of a hard transition because I enjoyed being part of the group. But you all did an excellent job to stick 2 years to a project for 2 years, and you actually came to most of the meetings. That was the most amazing thing to me. I just can't thank you enough, and I'm sure that even Ossie is happy with what we've come up with, and I owe you all a drink. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Parker.
Again, thank you for your hard work working alongside so many others over these past 2 years. I really appreciate this document, your testimony. I also appreciate that it puts front and center student outcomes, and it reminds us of just the urgency that is required in this work, because we are failing many of our students, and I know that can be lost in many of the education debates that we have. I just want to underscore a few points, and then I actually do have one question. But in this report, it did strike me that you are calling for a comprehensive equity plan. I think you're calling on or recommending that the DME create that. I am in full agreement that that type of plan is necessary. I underscore that you are seeking research around key educational inputs and outcomes to reduce gaps. I would have you know that a similar proposal is before the board currently, and I would encourage my colleagues to take heed to those types of recommendations from the task force, because I too believe that we need to know much more about what's happening in our classroom so that we can reduce the gaps that we see in student outcomes. You also mentioned targeted support for lower rated schools. I know many of us would agree that we shouldn't necessarily be rating our schools at all, but for those that are in the bottom tier as it relates to that ranking system, that they receive supports. And so, Ossie, I just would update you that I know they are providing a number of targeted and tailored professional learning opportunities for teachers and schools next year. And so I'm happy to share resources if you have not already heard about that. And then lastly, there was one other thing I underlined, but getting to my question about the budget highlights that are in this report, which I also think are very strong. To what extent Councilmember Grasso obviously has legislation before the council regarding budget comprehensive and aligning across sectors. To what extent have these recommendations been shared, sought, or any feedback to that office?
I don't think this has been shared with Grosso's office directly. His legislation, from what I could see, focused primarily on central office and having them categorize their spending. Kind of look like at grade level bands almost. This is because the report card requires school level data. I think the per pupil is the one that's required by law. But we were just trying to think how, since we're already going to have a section there, and there were some concerns from some of us, especially those of us who serve schools with high levels of special education or ELL, that it looks like we have a lot of money on paper. But when you start to bust out the data, then we notice like that, oh look, half our at-risk money is missing, right? And that like that's harder to hide when we have more detail, and that's a DCPS issue. But so I think that was kind of where we were going with that, at the school level instead of central office.
Thank you.
Mr. Batchelor.
Thank you all for your service, and congratulations on the end of your sequestration by the State Board of Education. I just had one question. A lot of this was, at least a lion's share of your reporting around equity had to do with resourcing and the inequity in resourcing. And obviously that's been a public debate given the budget cuts that we're seeing in some of our schools east of the Anacostia River and in high poverty communities, but also tied to, I think, what you categorize as insufficient supports for those bottom tier schools. Was there any discussion during the course of your deliberation around fundamentally changing the way we fund schools? And if so, what were some of those discussions?
So thank you for asking that question. I'm thankful that you are my particular representative from Ward 8, and we know what we went through this last budgeting cycle with a lot of our schools. You know, we saw schools that had great STEM programs, like, again, using Henley and Principal Riggins down there, and at the same time, she got her budget cut by close to $1 million. I just know numerous teachers over there on both sides in sectors that got their budgets kind of cut because of the way things were happening. We did talk about that, and how I wanted to emphasize that we talked about your star is not an indictment on the work that's happening in your school. It's just not. First, let's start there and not look at it as something that's a bad thing, but something more that says, okay, there needs to be a focus on resources here. It's more of a call for resources. And we talked about how we could put more resources in those particular areas. Something has to change about that, where you actually, and we didn't come up with a particular formula or anything, but that you actually are changing how you fund schools based on what they received as on their star ratings and everything. Again, it cannot be an indictment. I know numerous, literally hundreds of teachers and principals in the District of Columbia who do great work, yet they're being underfunded, and they have great programs, and they're receiving low stars. And so we have to really categorically look at that and how we do that, and make sure that that star represents a call for help, so to speak, and resources, and that will have to come from you guys who put that formula in. But we talked about things as far as, you know, that you need to do a count more than once a year. You know, October 5th shouldn't be the end all to be all. That, you know, a child goes somewhere, and I'm saying this as a charter person, you know, that sometimes people say that you know, we kick people out after October 5th, just to be honest with you guys, and, you know, we hear that story, but that funding should follow that child. So these things have to be changed categorically about how we fund those schools, how we're looking at at-risk children, and making sure that they're getting all the resources that they need on a regular basis, because you're talking about there's not a lot of mental health practitioners in a lot of the schools that need them east of the river. And when you have a small LEA that's just starting up, like a charter school, they don't have those resources. They're just starting out. But they need those, because more than likely, like you take a rocket ship, or you take a Henley, or you take a Turner, they have a high, you know, population of at-risk students that are going through some type of trauma, and they don't have the funding for that. So we do need to look at that, sir.
I just wanted to add in, if I could, we definitely didn't talk about changing the formula per se, but we did talk about the fact that community-based providers are underutilized, and their partners, and sometimes they're really shut out of schools because it's very difficult to get through the bureaucracy. But, you know, considering, you know, like the student group that came forward and said our kids can't leave their trauma at the door, you know, and we know, and the whole city is moving towards trauma-informed, you know, in terms of how we're approaching working with young people, yet we don't have adequate resources in the school system to deal with the mental health needs or the lack of basic needs. And so I think, you know, I'm not sure what the current formula is, but clearly it's not addressing those gaps, so it probably does need to be reworked. And I think bringing providers in to the mix and making sure there's ways that you can use, there's lots of providers in the community that want to be in the schools doing the work, but they can't, or they can only do it if they can raise the money themselves.
Right.
And that just doesn't work. And the other thing that we talked about was, and I'm definitely not an expert, but that the city spent this time figuring out what the funding rate was per pupil and for at-risk kids, and all this time we figured it out, and then we didn't even use what we found out. So I don't know. You guys probably know more than me about this, but I don't get, as a layperson, like, I don't get it. Why do we spend all that time to figure it out, how much money we need for us to then not give our students and schools the funds that they need? So let's just do that. Let's just start with that. And I don't know what other type of sacrifices that means, but I mean, all the data says that without education, our kids are set up to fail. So we have to really reorganize our priorities as a city as well.
Amen. Thank you. President Wattenberg.
So I'm going to be super quick, partly because I gave some of my time to Sheila, but I have two. First, I want to say thank you for the focus on the budget, that so much starts at the budget, and thank you so much for the focus on research, both the kind of research that we can do per what Zach said, and the incredible research that we hope the RPP is going to be taking on. Very quickly, I have two questions for each of you. One, Mr. Patterson, you raised how a lot of schools feel like they are indicted by the star rating. So my question to each of you is, do you know schools or staff that do in fact feel indicted by the star rating, who think that's what it is? And two, what is one thing you would put on the report card, either related to budget or not related to budget, next time?
So yes, I do know individuals who have felt like indicted. I won't go through names or anything like that and put them out there. But in my EML class, I remember I was in the first year of serving on the task force, and we actually had our meeting at Cardoza, EML class in Georgetown there. And all the principals came up. They were actually having a meeting with, I believe, with someone, but all the principals were meeting. And they came up to that meeting, and they're like, Jacques, I can't believe that you guys are going to do this to us, and you're going to give us these ratings, and you know how hard we're working. You know us personally, you know, but this is going to just be devastating to my school, you know, because I know I'm going to get a 1 star. There's not a doubt in my mind. I'm going to get a 1, maybe a 2 if I'm lucky. And so that was very hard to take for me, because I knew them very personally. We struggled through coursework and things together. So yes, I do know quite a few people that feel that way. So.
One thing for the report card?
One thing for the report card, children that are traumatized, I think that is one of my biggest things, how we talk about trauma, or how we address trauma, or how many trauma certified teachers that we may have, and how
That's
we're
a good one. How many trauma certified teachers? I like it.
That trauma is big with me.
And for the question about indictment or what have you, I mean, I haven't had a school say to me specifically, but as a person that reviewed the report cards, right, like, I mean, to me, it was disappointing, right? Because some of the, you know, the thinking, even as a member of the committee, right, you know, we had our own issues with it. And basically, some of the schools, to Jacques' point, like, I've worked very closely with Ballou for a number of years to see them come up as a 1 star, like, you know, it's very discouraging. And then when you think about everything that the students already went through with the whole graduate, you know, so I mean, it just, to me, in some ways, it disrespected the hard work that everyone was trying to do. In reference to the report card, I would say a measure of student connectedness would be really important. How do students who go to that school feel about that school? That's really indicative of a lot of things.
Got it.
Yep, so I definitely know people who feel kind of indicted, the word, or just like not shocked. I mean, we were shocked we had 2 stars because we just assumed it was going to be the end. But I think, there is kind of a feeling of hopelessness that, especially because of the way the measurement's on like a bell curve, that, for 2 years, I guess you can advance the ranks, but then the new metric gets set, and then a set of schools are going to be on the bottom again, and that's in perpetuity. As long as we keep this system. So I think there is kind of a feeling for some of us that like we are going to be at the bottom forever. And that's just how it's going to be. And then we're going to start getting blamed for it. In terms of what I'd want on the report card, I'm going to stick with funding. I really want to see kind of, I wouldn't call it specialty, but kind of the additional funds, how much school receives at the school level, and then their expenditures. So that's at-risk, special ed, ELL. Because I'm still pretty
dollars for each
convinced
category.
that the system's cheating.
It's late, so I was not going to do a second round, but I do want to give members who do have a great need to ask another question. I want to give people an opportunity to do that. Mr. O'Leary.
I don't have a question. I just hope that the people who are viewing this stay to the end of the show, because your testimony in the last 5 minutes was fabulous, and it touches exactly what we need to do in our systems in order to educate our children, and it was very telling, and I really appreciate it.
Oh,
I just again want to say thank you for serving.
yeah, thank you so much to all of you. I was at one of the meetings, and it was so interesting. I could tell people were so interested in it. So thank you very much. You can go. All right, guys, we have one more item. Oh, I'm sorry. The first thing we need to do, we have 2 more items. The first thing we need to do is I would like to turn to the ESSA Task Force Chair, Karen Williams, of Ward 7, for the motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Okay. Would someone like to second it?
Second.
Okay. The motion having been properly moved and seconded, I call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. I mean, the ayes have it. The report is accepted. Thank you, guys. The report is accepted. And I do also, I want to say a special thanks to Karen for chairing this and picking it up midway and taking it through. So thank you very, very much for that. Now we have one more item, which is the naming of someone to the Community Schools Advisory Board. We talked about this very quickly at the working group, at the working session. A school, of course, is more than a place. It's the starting point of a community. For a number of years, our colleagues at OSSI have administered a grant program to assist schools in the development of community school programs across the district. Community schools offer supports to students, families, and school personnel based on the particular needs of that school. Our executive director has represented the State Board on the Community School Incentive Initiative grant since he joined the State Board almost 4 years ago. Recently, the mayor revised the advisory board to better support that expansion. I move that the State Board appoint John Paul Hayworth as a representative to the revised Community Schools Advisory Board. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion having been properly moved and seconded, I call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. No. Oh, so the ayes have it. The motion is carried. You are on the advisory board. And with no further business before the State Board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. The time
So
is
moved.
8:44.
Second.
Oh,
Third.
okay. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Okay. The ayes have it, and the public meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is adjourned at 8:44 p.m. Thank you, everybody.